In the impeccably clean interior of a brand new camper van, a man finds himself in the company of an amazing fluffy white owl. He stares wide-eyed at the window, unable to recover from shock. Sweat streams down his face as he tries to comprehend the impossible thing standing before him. Just outside the vehicle, a giant multi-horned monster roars wildly and rages fiercely. Its enormous claws tear the ground as it charges across the meadows. Only 24 hours earlier, life had been much more ordinary. Everything boiled down to a routine deal in the city. Shaiju beamed with pride as the professional dealer officially handed him the keys to the luxurious new mobile home, congratulating him on such a significant purchase. He sincerely thanked him, confessing that owning such a camper had long been his dream. Then she handed him a small token of appreciation, a universal selfie stick. He examined the device and realized it could also be used as a sturdy tripod, making it a thoughtful addition for any traveler. The woman explained that documenting one's own journey had become common among camping enthusiasts. Demand had grown for content featuring solo outings and picturesque locations. She advised him to use it to record his future adventures. In his enthusiasm, he immediately suggested putting the new tripod to use to take a memorable photo together in front of the van. She seemed surprised by the sudden proposal, but he insisted. After all, it would be a great way to mark the occasion. He proudly stands next to his new purchase, the polished white camper, whose size outweighs both him and the professional who helped with the deal. With a wide smile, he turns back to the dealer and shows a photo of the moment on his phone, prompting a polite bow and a word of thanks from her as they complete the handover. As soon as he sat behind the wheel, his face lit up with pure joy, his fingers gripping the steering wheel for the first time. With a decisive turn of the ignition key, the engine roars to life at full power, and a wave of adrenaline rushes through his entire body. The massive vehicle quickly rolls away from the dealership. Its heavy frame smoothly glides onto the road, and he begins his journey. His preparation for the road ahead is thorough. He stops at a specialized outdoor recreation store to gather everything necessary, leaving with bags in hand, his gaze stubbornly fixated again and again on the impressive van parked nearby. The journey continues. The modified bus speeds along the highway, and its long silhouette sharply cuts against the backdrop of the landscape. Eventually, he reaches Yandere Auto Campground, a picturesque recreational spot in the mountains, where he finds a place among other campers and settles in for the evening. While he relaxes on the playground, his amazed friend calls him can't believe the scale of the purchase. He explains that it is a conversion of a minibus, the largest possible size allowed by a standard license. And despite the staggering 20 million yen price, he couldn't be happier with his new mobile home. He recalled those exhausting years when he lived on corporate, hard labor, amid a toxic atmosphere where abuse was hurled and endless demands never ceased. In that hellish time, he dragged work like a beast of burden, but the bright side was that he lacked time to spend what he earned. The money slowly accumulated into savings. After a decade of living on the bare minimum and cautious investments of his hard-earned money, Sidger finally reached the moment when he could change his life. Sitting in his modest apartment, he admits, although he is alone, this huge camper is a hard-won reward for years of sacrifice and petty saving. With a new goal, he extends his hand to an old friend. His voice rings with excitement as he suggests recreating those camping trips from their youth. He recalls how joyful it was to travel together in the seniors' camper and passionately longs to return to those carefree moments. And the answer from that end of the line is a cold reminder of the passage of time. His friend says that now everyone is already grown up. Many have married, have children, and are raising them, so just dropping everything and rushing into an adventure like in student years is no longer possible. Unmoved, Sidru paints a vivid picture of that special freedom that a camper provides. You can cook and relax inside regardless of the weather. He insists that the journey itself, where people talk and laugh until they reach their destination, will become a long-awaited escape from the monotony of their daily lives. He goes even further to sweeten the deal, offers to take on all logistics and equipment, and even invites their families. Meanwhile, while he carefully cleans the appearance of his new car, he waits for his friend to at least agree to bring this idea to their old outdoor group. The conversation suddenly takes on a lighter tone. His friend jokingly asks if he is hallucinating from exhaustion, cannot believe that he really bought such an expensive car. He laughs loudly, confirms the purchase, and confidently declares that he has finally quit the job that tormented his soul and held him captive for so long. Plans for the next day of rest are already made. He hangs up the receiver and approaches his pride, a genuine smile of satisfaction on his face. He is warmed by the thought of finally showing off his favorite camper and setting off on the journey he has been heading toward for a whole decade. He finally reached the destination. The sleeping camper van stands quietly, nestled against the backdrop of majestic mountains and quiet lakes. Having entered inside, he surveys the pristine interior of his new house on wheels, the result of a decade of sacrifices. The man exhales a long, exhausted sigh of relief. He closes his eyes as the burden of years of corporate drudgery begins to lift from his shoulders. He cannot help but celebrate. He clenches his fist in the air and remembers how his exhausting work finally made sense. He lies on his back and realizes money is important, but life without joy is like being walled up in a pit. He plans to spend the night alone, and tomorrow meet with friends, even dreaming of the day when he will share this path with a partner or his own family. Suddenly, a flashing, dazzling white light explodes, devours the space, and instantly erases the peaceful atmosphere. He suddenly sits up straight, trembling. A panic scream about being late bursts out of him even before he remembers. He is on a well-deserved vacation. Falling back onto the pillows, he regrets how deeply the habits of corporate life have ingrained themselves into his very being, but still decides to just rest for the rest of the day. His moment of silence is shattered by a sudden realization or sound. Hurriedly jumps out of the van in a panic run. He goes around the front of the vehicle, and his eyes widen in shock when he sees what is there. The man froze in place, a gulp of air caught in his throat as he fixed his gaze on the impossible vision, his pupils dilated to the limit from pure, unclouded shock. He stepped out of the van and immediately found himself in a completely unfamiliar landscape. Instead of the lake camp he remembered, towering, jagged giant peaks rose above him. Looking back, he was already counting the days and still could not understand where the lake had gone. He was sure he had parked in the auto campsite. Panic crept in as soon as he realized he had no memory of how he got to this deserted, rocky place. He desperately needed answers, but looking at his phone, he saw there was no signal. He quickly returned to the van and relied on the vehicle's navigation, hoping it would still work even where the signal was very weak. He frantically touched the screen, begging it to show where he was located. Instead of a map, the display flickered and came to life, showing a quirky interface. It had 10 points, and it was currently at level 1. There was a list of incredible options from automatic repairs to vehicle storage and even a water supply system. He stared at the screen, and the confusion only grew as he tried to understand these points and levels that were mentioned. It was not what he saw in the manual. All he wanted was a simple map that would lead him home. A sudden hard blow jerked the van, and a heavy object crashed onto the roof with a rumbled sound echoed like a reverberation in the cramped cabin. He froze in fear. He stared through the windshield, and his heart was pounding wildly as he tried to understand what exactly could have fallen from the sky. He lowers his gaze to the small white creature writhing on the ground, its wings wildly beating against the dirt. Approaching, he notices a foreign object deeply embedded in the feathers. The animal is clearly suffering because of it. While he recalls the warning that birds of prey are dangerous and unpredictable, the type of animal suffering overrides his caution and he decides that he cannot just leave it to die. He moves with careful precision, gently pressing the fluffy bird and quickly extracting the source of its pain, a primitive wooden arrow. As soon as he pulls out the projectile, the creature lets out a sharp, painful cry, yet it still remains relatively motionless in his hands. Thanks to his foresight in taking a first aid kit in the van, he applies a clean bandage to the wound, speaks quietly to the bird, and smilingly says that the simple treatment seems to have made it much more comfortable. The bird suddenly takes off, but does not flee into the thicket circles and confidently lands on his shoulder, its claws gently gripping the vest. He continues walking through the tall grass, amused by how this creature seems to reach out to him. Although people say owls never bond with humans, this one appears to express sincere gratitude for his help. A sharp rustle in the dense underbrush stops him in his tracks. He understands that the arrow means a crossbowman. In a weary greeting, he calls into the darkness and asks the owl to stay safely behind while he tries to determine where the noise is coming from. The rough blows of his hard hammers strike the ribs as two grotesque green-skinned monsters burst out of the thicket. They hold roughly made stone knives and bear their fangs crooked, jagged. Their guttural growling fills him with fear. They rush forward, growling so fiercely that the skin chills, and their jagged teeth bare with a predatory intent. Shaidru recoils in fear, tightly pressing the small white owl to his chest, and limping backward, tries with all his might to escape the reach of the primitive attackers. He acts on pure instinct. He struggles with the remote in his hand and presses the unlock button. A resonant mechanical rumble, and the side doors near the white camper van slide open, revealing a sudden metallic refuge from what is approaching ever closer. The heavy machine roars, jerks forward, and accelerating, raises a cloud of dust, fleeing away from the clearing. Behind remain two green-skinned creatures standing in mud and filth. Their crude weapons are raised in senseless rage as the prey disappears into the distance. Safe inside the cabin, he collapses into the driver's seat, his heart pounding like a hammer against his ribs. With wide-open eyes, he looks at the monitor where the figures of monsters crawl away, and questions race wildly in his mind. Are they aliens, underground dwellers, or some mythical kappa? The camp van continues to rapidly back away. The engine's hum drowns out the sounds of the forest. From the edge of the thicket, the primitive hunters watch as the strange mobile metal box disappears from sight. One of them still grips the bow, which proved useless against this speed. He grips the steering wheel with trembling hands, his eyes flicking from the road ahead to the rearview display. When the monsters finally vanish from the screen, a new wave of fear washes over him. He has no idea what these unmapped wildfields are or how he ended up here. The white van moves along the uneven forest path. The wheels crunch dry leaves and twigs. The fluffy canopy overhead lets light filter through, so long shadows slide and shift across the vehicle as it plunges deeper into the unknown. Although he still noticeably trembles inside, he maintains a steady pace. His eyebrows glisten with cold sweat. Nearby, the white owl remains quietly perched in place, its large eyes fixed on the man who just saved them both from an inevitable cruel end. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his breathing erratic, and the forest ahead shattered the silence with the thunder of cracking, branches and trunks breaking. Drops of sweat ran down his face as he stared forward in fear, not knowing what new nocturnal horror was about to emerge from the darkness. He heard trees breaking like dry slices, and that sound meant something huge was already sneaking toward his location. Suddenly, a figure jumped out from the visor above his head, a blur against the falling leaves. The warrior descended with a drawn blade and landed gracefully near the vehicle's roof, as if she had been watching from above. She was an elf, her pointed ears twitched as she felt the terrain with wide, focused eyes. Her face was a mix of stern determination and sudden shock at the mechanical monster emerging beneath her, a strange object she clearly did not expect to find amid this chaos. When she landed, the young man in the van could only freeze in shocked silence. The ground trembled, and the forest belt bowed under the weight of something much larger than one warrior, confirming his worst suspicions about the source of the destruction. A deafening roar shook the very air, and a gigantic many-eyed creature, breaking through the thickets, was hurled outside like a whirlwind. It loomed over the elf and the strange metal cart, a gaping maw, jagged rows of teeth, and a tongue hanging limply ready to crush everything in its path. Reacting instantly, the elf woman began to draw a swirling vortex of energy between her palms, her face frozen in a mask of concentration. Inside the van, the driver screamed in frantic fear, his thoughts confused by the boundless scale of the monster before him, and he cried out pleadingly, begging for survival. She released the gathered power, a piercing beam of light that rushed through the air with a hot whistle. The projectiles hit without missing, shattering deep into one of the creature's many eyes, and as the monster's head jerked back from the blow, splashes of dark ichor burst out. The beast jerked back, a hoarse howl of pain tore from its throat as it grabbed its wounded face. Seizing the moment, the warrior decisively landed on the ground, gripping the sword hilt tighter, and prepared for the next phase of the fight, keeping her gaze fixed on her bulky opponent. She lunged forward with lethal precision, the blade sank deep into the monster's eye. Shidru froze in icy horror from his safe seat in the truck as the beast roared in pain and dark ichor splattered from the wound. The mighty monster suddenly lost strength and with a dull, deafening crash flew into the ground, raising a wall of dust and debris several steps away from the vehicle. Standing triumphantly atop the fallen titan, the warrior glanced over her shoulder, her face unreadable. Inside the van, Shidru struggled to comprehend what he had seen. His head spun from how terrifyingly real the encounter had become. He was still gripping the steering wheel. Nearby, in the silence, a small white owl sat silently as they watched through the settling dust. Suddenly she dashed toward the van, and her voice cut through the silence as she ordered him not to move. Shidru flinched, his heart pounded wildly from her sudden, aggressive attack. Reaching the window, she leaned in and pressed a vigilant gaze against it, repeatedly demanding that he not move. Shidru's eyes widened in disbelief, not only from the closeness, but also because she spoke perfect Japanese. Without any warning, her strength seemed to evaporate, and she fell face down on the ground right in front of the van. Shidru watched her from the driver's seat, wondering whether the battle had finally finished her or if she was gravely wounded. Carefully, he climbed out of the vehicle, approached her unconscious form, and called out whether she was conscious. She lay motionless. The forest silence enveloped them again as he stood over his mysterious savior. He stares at the fallen warrior woman, and the thought races through his mind he needs to sort her out. She looks human, but her long, pointed ears suggest otherwise. He goes through names from myths and legends, pixie, imp, fairy, and finally settles on the word elf. Glancing over the massacre, he realized the traces of his disappearance were undeniable. Here were the giant corpse of a monster, strange creatures with green skin, and a landscape unlike any part of Japan he knew. While he looks at the helpless elf, the truth finally takes root in his mind. This is not the world he came from. He freezes, cold sweat running down his back as he tries to comprehend the impossible. Things like multiversal reality or interdimensional travel flicker in his mind, but sound like empty words beyond his true understanding. Standing alone between his van and the remnants of the supernatural battle, he finally realizes everything. He has somehow wandered into a completely different world. Shidru carefully prepares a hot bowl of porridge from a retort pouch. His face is warm as he watches the white owl sitting on his shoulder. He is glad to be able to treat the guests to something truly hearty. The warrior woman takes a cipher eyes involuntarily close from pure happiness, and the flavors of the warm dish restore her strength. This is definitely the tastiest thing she has eaten in recent days. While she eats, she explains the desperate circumstances that brought her here, how a hunting trip that went awry turned into a confrontation with a dangerous animal. In this cornered commotion, she lost all supplies and has been wandering for several days without a crumb of food or a drop of water. He listens and gets more and more confused, especially when she says that then, seeing him for the first time, she thought, he seems to be devoured by a monster. And he understands. They speak the same language, but the meaning of her words feels alien as if they are from different realities. He points to the giant metal machine behind him. He asks if this is the monster she was talking about. She nods respectfully, acknowledging that although it looks dormant and quiet now, in her eyes it appears as a formidable and dangerous creature. This news plunges him into deep reflection. He rests his chin on his hand and feels the full weight of his situation finally settling. The fact that she perceives the camper van as a living being confirms his suspicion has truly crossed into a world where the common sense of his home no longer applies. Breaking the silence, she politely bows and introduces herself as Gina, sincerely thanking for the life-saving lunch. He responds in kind, introducing himself as Yoshioka Shidru, then quickly adds that she should just call him Shidru to keep things less formal. Then he cautiously asks if the name Japan means anything to her, hoping for at least a shred of familiarity. She shakes her head. She has never heard of such a place, and she asks if it is the name of his native village, forcing him to grapple with the boundless distance between their roots. He listens while she introduces herself as an elf from the village of Harkim. While she speaks, he reflects on the strange nature of being able to understand each other and wonders if his camper van is hiding the key to return home. His gaze lingers on her and his thoughts race wildly. What does this new world mean, and who is Sheth, mysterious girl before him? Continuing to eat porridge with focused passion, he cannot help but notice how sincere and simple it is despite its martial past. Suddenly she jerks back with a sharp scream. The body instantly tenses, freezes in a fighting stance, adjust instinct. She quickly apologizes and explains that after several days of fighting alone, her reflexes react to the slightest jolt, and he tries to calm her down by offering to take over the cleaning. She insists that she will wash the dishes herself. Her face is determined as she looks for any way to be helpful in exchange for his kindness. He looks at her with a gentle smile, touched by her sense of duty. He shifted his gaze to the small white owl sitting nearby and aloud wondered whether this creature had become attached to the camper or was even capable of understanding his words. The owl responded with a quiet, all-understanding hootas, if confirming his suspicions. Later, he sits before the trembling control panel interface of his vehicle. On the screen, a balance of 10 points and a list of available upgrades. He decides it's time to check what this system is capable of and how it can help them. He studies various functions, navigation, repairs, and supplies, recording the cost of each in points. Realizing he lacks resources, he knows the next step must be chosen with utmost caution to survive in this unknown land. He immediately turns on the navigation system. The screen flickers and comes to life. A detailed map of Kodio Kingdom appears before them, ready to chart a path through unknown lands. When the map is active, it directs attention to other vital needs, selecting fuel and water supply functions. In this wild area, survival is impossible without them, and he knows they cannot afford to be without them. Despite the confirmation on the screen that supplies are automatically replenished, he looks around the cabin, confused. Nothing has changed and he can only wonder if the system works as intended at all. He checks the internal instruments and the water dispenser, but the levels do not change. Uncertainty gnaws at him as he tries to figure out when and how exactly these resources will manifest. The weight of this situation finally begins to press down, sinks forward, exhausted by a sudden wave of nostalgia. He is drawn to simple, straightforward journeys from the past, away from the strange world and its demands. Shakes off the sadness. notices 7 points left and comes across an option for a transport shelter. The idea immediately captivates. To drag a huge camper through a wild, broken dirt road in the forest belt is a tough task, and being able to hide the transport in a cave is an undeniable advantage. He carefully reads the activation instructions. They seem almost unbelievably simple. You just need to raise both hands to the car and say the command. He cannot help but feel a slight skepticism about this kind of true magic. Emerging from the shelter directly into the forest thicket, he decides to test the theory in practice. To his complete surprise, as soon as he gives the command, a huge camper van disappears in a flash of light, and he is left alone in the forest clearing with only the company of a small white owl. He froze in place and stared into the emptiness where just a moment ago that huge transport had stood. Panic crept in as soon as he realized the disaster he was in. What would he do now that his only shelter had vanished into thin air? Remembering the order, he sharply thrust his hands forward and shouted for the ship to turn around. Nearby, a small white owl watched him with wide, curious eyes as he tried to reverse the magic. With a sharp, heavy, dull thud, the van suddenly reappeared in reality, and its solar panels flashed in the light. He gasped from undeniable confusion. Such a thing is simply impossible to comprehend. The elven warrior froze before the screen, her wide-open eyes trembling with admiration, and her former suspicion turned into deep respect. She decided that he must be a master summoner, since he could summon such a huge creature in an instant, and bowed her head, sincerely thanking him for his help. She continued and exclaimed that she could not believe it. He was even accompanied by the great forest owl. He glanced at the bird and then at the warrior, and his confusion only deepened when he realized this little creature mattered here many times more than he could have imagined. Addressing him with a new measure of ceremony, she called him Lord Shaidru, a title that completely threw him off balance. Even the owls seemed to sense the change in intonation, softly uttering a gentle "who," while the warrior's gaze sharply intensified, suddenly acquiring a sudden, burning focus. Without warning, she snatched the blade and, flashing steel, struck the small object that was hidden or perhaps just thrown away. It twitched from the sharp fury of the movement, and its gaze fixed on the glowing ring that was now falling right before it. When she gathered herself and walked away with a confident step, he called out to her, his voice tinged with concern. He hurried after her, anxiously asking if he had accidentally offended her or done something that could have provoked this sharp reaction. Vinka dashed forward with blinding speed, but the threat had not yet retreated. Suddenly, a gigantic, green-skinned goblin appeared before Themisiv and Merciless. Its maw was wide open, dripping foul saliva onto the ground. Shaidru jerked back in pure shock. His mind raced. Where did this greenish monster come from? Without any pause, the warrior woman sliced them with her blade in a deadly, shimmering arc. The goblin's head flew off in an instant, and dark blood splattered into the air. Calmly she noted, "These creatures are scavengers, drawn by the sharp smell of monster remains," while her companion trembled with fear. When the first threat fell, another goblin rushed from a high place to meet it, his crooked weapon impulse beams for a deadly strike. Shaidru barely managed to recognize the new attacker, but his companion was already one step ahead. Her hand flashed with light, and she was preparing for a counter-strike. A sharp wave of magical energy tore through the air and ripped the goblin jumper apart before he could land. The beast flew back, its body pierced through, and it thudded to the ground. In a matter of seconds, the remains of the slain goblins began to decompose, disintegrating into smoky black strands that vanished with the wind. Shaidru froze in place, eyes wide with disbelief at how quickly and efficiently the fight had ended. Sudden cruelty faded away, covered by a heavy, oppressive silence. The steady rhythm of rain broke the quiet. The forest seemed to freeze, holding its breath until the immediate danger passed, and finally left the survivors alone with the damp clearing. Turning to her companions, Gina suggested setting off before new marauders arrived. She shared her plan, to return to Harkim Villigeth, nearest settlement, a refuge where the monsters terrorizing the wild lands are relatively less troublesome. Then she handed the young man an official invitation, calling him her savior and inviting him to join her. Shaidru weighed the options. The village could be the key to understanding this strange land, or even suggest a way back to his own world end. The white owl watched him closely with attentive, all-knowing eyes. He asks if the little white owl can also go with them, and she warmly agrees, gladly inviting them both to travel with her. Suddenly she stumbles and falls to her knees, her body trembling. He rushes to her in alarm and asks if she is not injured after that previous fight. A terrible rumble bursts from within her, rolling in echoes of silence across the clearing. She and the owl freeze in shocked gaze, then a motionless silence until it becomes clear where her loss of strength truly came from. Disgraced to the extreme, she hides her face and apologizes for the unworthy performance. He instantly calms her down. he sees that she hasn't eaten for several days and offers portable rations that he always has on hand. While they prepare to set off, the sky darkens, and a heavy downpour cuts through the desert expanse lined with rows of stone columns. He retreats to the safety of his car and looks through the window as she stands alone under the raging downpour, and the truck nearby hums steadily with its engine. Looking at her through the glass, he sees how her snug hood is soaked through in the rain, and her figure is tiny against the gray sky. He calls to her, urging her to hide inside the trailer where it is dry, but she politely refuses, saying she is used to the rain and has already regained her strength. After that, he asks how much longer they have to travel to reach the village. He continues to press the gas through the rain while the elf explains the way ahead. She says, the horse will reach Harkham village in 1 day, but on foot it will take them 2.5. During these words, a faint sadness trembles in her voice. She remembers the horse she lost during the monster attack. Along the long road ahead he urges, let her come inside, explaining that the car is fast and will hide her from the rain. He warns, the cold will drain her strength even more. She utters a quiet thank you, but does not come in. Despite his invitation, she hesitated. A deep, ancient fear clouded her gaze. She admits she trusts him, but the very thought of crossing the threshold of what looks like the belly of a huge beast frightens her. He looks at her and finally understands. Her hesitation is not about him, it is about that strange machine he calls home. She continues to explain her conflict. She says she is grateful for the food he gave her, but feels a natural restraint about entering the private space of a stranger she has just met. In response, he moves forward with renewed strength, dismisses her doubts, and insists that he is not just glad but eagerly awaiting the person who saved him. He tries to reassure her, saying this transport should not be feared. It is a means specially designed to make the long journey pleasant. He begins to list the numerous comforts hidden in the metal walls, how one can cook food here, sit comfortably, stretch out their legs, and even sleep soundly. When he mentions that one can wash off dirt and the fatigue of the day with a shower, she looks at him with wide-open eyes with admiration bordering on wonder. For her, this idea was completely foreign. When the strange cart wanders across the wide, open steps beneath the towering mountains, it becomes clear what their journey truly means. It is a vessel of absolute freedom. It can take them anywhere they want along a known path or where no foot has yet stepped. He concludes the explanation by saying that inside they are safe from biting insects and wild animals of the night. Though the heat burns during the day and the frost bites at night, inside it still remains a refuge of comfort, protected from the weather. He continues his speech, gesturing to the middle to emphasize the space, explaining that there is enough room for several people, and imagining it as a shelter where moments with family and friends can be cherished. Climbing to the window with a radiant smile, he briefly summarizes the essence of the machine, calling it simply a moving home. Suddenly his face twitches and it dawns on him. The burden of reality settles on him and he slumps over the handlebars. He begins to spiral into worries about the dangers of this world, what will happen if monsters appear, and how to deal with the depletion of water and fuel supplies and the unstable electricity supply. Watching him closely, the elf notices the deep affection he clearly feels for this strange metal companion. He catches her gaze and immediately feels a sharp prick of anxiety, fearing that his outburst of technical worries has pushed her away. However, she gives a soft smile, and her gaze warms as she considers his description of the mobile home for Lovasand, finds the very idea truly wonderful. He exhales with relief at her consent. Then he turns back to the window and watches the rain tapping on the glass, while the little white owl calmly settles nearby. He peeks out from the driver's seat as the morning light breaks through the dense branches, illuminating the clearing there, where their strange journey hung suspended. She looked up at the clear sky and noticed how suddenly it became so beautiful it confused him while he was gazing through the window, and nearby on the windowsill sat a small, fluffy owlet. Above them, the heavens are cut by dazzling streaks of light, and the celestial glow falls on the rocky mountain peaks and a solitary vehicle parked below. For a moment he is paralyzed by the spectacle, whispers admiration to the empty air. Nearby she slowly lowers her hood, and the cool morning air touches her face as she surveys the landscape. Her face softens, a barely noticeable blush spreads across her cheeks as she turns back to the window. Addressing him with formal respect, she admits that although fear still lives in her heart, she hopes that one day he will truly take her with him on his journeys. He immediately responds with enthusiasm and sincere confirmation. His face lights up with a genuine smile. Then he begins to add another thought, and his nervousness is mirrored by a quiet white owl nearby. Leaning even further over the window to shorten the distance between them, he suggests they drop the formalities and asks to be called simply Shajido. She hesitates, reaching for confirmation, and then he in turn says he will address her the same way, Gina. A bright smile spreads across her face as she tries to say his name for the first time. Feeling a real shoulder beside him, she openly says how sincerely she hopes for their future Tojtharan. That is exactly how their true partnership story begins. She accepts the new terms of their relationship with warm, official cordiality, but the sudden shift to intimacy proves too much for the traveler. A wave of shame overwhelms him. He involuntarily hides his face in his hands and, recalling, realizes how awkward and uneasy he feels when addressed so casually by a young woman. When she notices his state and asks what happened, he quickly brushes off her concern, trying to compose himself while the dealer watches from the driver's seat. As they continue along the icy, snow-covered peaks of the mountain ridge, his thoughts close in on themselves. He admits that the desire to return to his original world has not changed, yet he cannot deny the cold, sharp beauty of the land, and more importantly, he understands that he is still capable of building deep, truly meaningful connections with others, part of himself he feared he had long thrown away. That moment of quiet calm and sudden hope, however, is tinged with the aftertaste of belated fear. Later, he will look back at that peaceful morning with pain and realize how carelessly he had not suspected the terrible events destined to unfold the very next day. The camp remains completely quiet, while the elf warrior sleeps deeply on the ground, unaware that the young man and his fluffy white owlet are watching him from a safe place from the camper van window. Eventually, he shudders from exhaustion right inside and finds refuge in the warmth of his bed, deciding to put aside all the day's worries and plunge into sleep. The thing shatters the thunderous scream that, which awakens San the terrible sight of a huge, ageless eye looking down on the camp. She screams at him in hysteria to move, but he reacts slowly, blinks, looks confused at the sudden urgency, and asks what could have gone wrong there. Before he can move, a many-eyed monster looms over him. It is gigantic, lumpy, and its hand-heavy tensifreezes, ready to crush everything in its path. The beast's paw descends, striking with a blow that echoes like thunder. It hurls him into a state of complete, paralyzing shock as the ground beneath him dissolves into nothingness. He sharply tears his eyes upward, convulsively gasping for air. The terrible image of the monster still burns in his memory until he realizes it was only a dream. When the reality of the nightmare settles, he doubts whether he is truly safe. Over the blankets lies a strange, heavy weight, and the feeling is too real. He suddenly sits up, shouting in horror. His eyes widen as a huge, white-feathered creature looms over him above the bed. Caught by surprise, he cannot get rid of the thought, can the owls of this world really grow to such gigantic sizes overnight? While he watches, the creature suddenly begins to shrink, and in a matter of seconds returns to its small, fluffy form. He doubts that the bird is not some kind of monster creature, but his confusion only grows when he realizes the wounds he suffered yesterday have completely disappeared. Having climbed out of the strange metal carriage into the morning light, he carries a bundle with bedding and looks back at the quiet glade, does not understand where his companion has gone. She soon emerges from the forest belt, approaches him, and smiles with gratitude, thanking him for the borrowed blankets. She admits that she decided to sleep outside again, so she still feels a bit of anxiety about entering the cramped interior of his car. With a sudden burst of energy, she exclaims that she has never slept so soundly, but immediately stops, realizing that falling into such a deep sleep in the wild is a dangerous miscalculation. She explains that her usual routine is to sleep on tree branches or on hard ground, wrapped only in a cloak, to stay alert and respond to the slightest movement of predators. Noticing her slight limp, he asks if she was injured while gathering the herbs she now carries. She brushes off his concern, saying it is just a minor scratch and a small price for the healing plants she found to thank him for his kindness. She admits that the fight with the monster yesterday left her with pain and swelling in her leg, but insists it will not prevent her from walking. He suggests looking for a compress or medicine to aid recovery. Her stomach shatters the silence with a thunderous growl, breaking the seriousness of the moment and leaving her to flush with embarrassment. She quickly apologizes, solemnly promising to find something to eat immediately while he sits watching with a gentle, understanding smile. Seeing her hunger, he offers to take the cooking helm himself, asks if she will allow him to cook the ingredients he gathered. She is momentarily confused and says that because she lost her tools along with the horse, she only planned to wash and fry the food, but he assures her he can make it much tastier. The warrior is silent. Her eyes widen as she processes his unexpected offer regarding culinary skills. Having received her silent consent, he returns inside his strange dwelling and hurries to begin preparations. As soon as he got inside, he was pleasantly surprised. The water tank was full, and the fuel had been replenished after one night. Relief because the ship is holding itself. This, it seems, is acknowledged even by the little white owl with a quiet tilt of its head in the hood. When he lays out the reward, she gives him various mushrooms and mountain vegetables. He places it next to his supplies of pasta and broth. He carefully examines the local vegetation, noting that it resembles familiar ingredients mushrooms and yams. Although the world around is different, he decides to trust her hunting skills, and assessing their safety, accepts the idea that to survive he will have to get used to the local food until he finds a way home. He begins the cooking process by putting the pasta to boil, while simultaneously working on mushrooms cut into bite-sized pieces. The two-burner stove in his compact kitchen becomes a real lifesaver as he prepares consommé in a separate saucepan. Continuing his work, he energetically kneads the mountain yam until it becomes perfectly sticky. As soon as the paste is almost ready, he transfers it into the boiling consommé and lets the flavors merge one last time until the final boil. The result is a hot bowl of consommé soup with pasta, topped with a delicate portion of grated yam. This is a dish specially prepared to restore strength and soothe the fatigue of their journey. When the spicy scent spreads in the air, he pauses for a moment to enjoy it, noticing a small white owl watching him intently. He gently offers to share food with the fluffy creature. Two companions settle behind a modest table under the open sky outside the tent. The transition from the cramped kitchen to the boundless wilderness only emphasizes the strange coziness of their temporary camp. The elf warrior looks at the unfamiliar dish, and curiosity and hesitation mingle in his gaze. He nods and explains, the best way to enjoy it is to take a full spoonful of soup along with all the other ingredients. As soon as she takes her first bite, she is immediately overwhelmed by a sensation she has never known before. The texture of the pasta and the richness of the broth make her open her eyes wide, and unable to exhale, she tries to grasp such culinary perfection. She eats with new enthusiasm, and her thoughts race to guess the spices that can give such a deep, complex flavor. She marvels at how the mushrooms she gathered herself have transformed. The earthy taste of the mushrooms perfectly highlights the unique, sticky texture of the yam. She beams with delight, praising him for being both a master chef and a summoner. He smiles in response, genuinely glad that his cooking has brought her so much joy, while the little white owl chirps happily nearby. The little creature continues pecking at its food, and she watches this with a soft, grateful expression. He observes them both and, in the quiet moment of shared satisfaction, feels relief and accomplishment. Between the large white van that serves as their mobile home, the team sits at the table right in the fresh air. The vendor stands nearby and, having finished the meal, surveys the silence and calm of the camp. He understands the simple joy of sharing a meal with others does not change, no matter what worlds he is thrown into. Nearby, she continues savoring the aftertaste, and a gentle smile lights up her face. She formally thanks him for the feast, her voice trembling with sincere gratitude. He, smiling reservedly, says, "It is the local ingredients, mushrooms and mountain yam, that truly make the dish special." Next to them, the fluffy white owlet has already fallen completely asleep, its belly full. He looks at the creature with a barely noticeable concern. Was it wise to feed it human food, considering how different it is from the owls he knew at home? Gina shifts the conversation to the mysterious bird and asks how it is connected to the forest owl. She recalls how he saved her from the green-skinned monsters and says, since then they have been inseparable. She explains that these creatures are highly respected as rare monsters. They protect crops from pests and are even revered as divine messengers. Shaidru listens, stunned. He had no idea that his little fluffy companion, whom he treated so simply, holds such a prestigious and sacred status in this land. He pondered the mind of this creature, wondering if it truly understood his words, considering that it had helped people in the past. Gina watched in delight, verifying in her mind the thought, the forest messenger can speak so clearly. Continuing his thoughts, he asked if he should also adopt the formal title forest owl for her, but the bird's skeptical expression seemed to say, better something more personal. He realized that calling her owl forever was too boring. He began to consider possible names. He suggested Hedwig, Minerva, and Kepra, but each of his attempts was met with a look of complete indifference from the fluffy creature. Noticing that he had no craving for grand titles, he quietly smiled and suggested something much simpler, Foot on the Stand. He watched as the just-spoken name immediately echoed. The owl fluttered its wings and scattered joyful hoo-hoo, as if confirming its agreement. He found it funny that such an ordinary name had won after all. Gina slightly bowed her head, accepting the new name for divine messenger, then indicated that the sun was high in the sky, a sign that it was time to resume their journey. Before them stretched endless and open plains, framed by distant, jagged mountain peaks under a clear sky. Sitting behind the wheel, he noticed how much smoother the ground had become. The road turned out to be much easier as soon as they finally reached the busy main highway. He leans out of the driver's seat and calls to Gina, asking if she still feels any fear of that huge creature they are walking along the path with. In response, she pauses. Her face softens as she considers the question, and the initial horror that overwhelmed her begins to reset, turning into something entirely different. She begins to recall the previous night and confesses. The bed was amazingly comfortable, but in the peaceful sleep there was an even deeper hidden meaning. He watches her intently, touched by this sudden change. She stood next to the gigantic machine and explained her insight. That monster nearby did not seem like a threat to her, rather a protection that allowed her to relax her vigilance. Her words cause his eyes to widen slightly. He is struck by the unexpected trust she places in him and his scout companion. She continues to explain and adds, "After all, he called him, and after all, little Fuda is here too, so the once terrifying beast now looks calm, gentle, and amazingly reliable." With sincere regret in her gaze, she apologizes for her initial hostility and for trying to hit him when they first met. Then she asks with a hint of hope if she may join them on the road, since the fear has already disappeared. She grants permission with a warm smile, assuring that even the transport seems to welcome her arrival. She is filled with gratitude. She shines, her eyes sparkle as she officially joins the group, and a cheerful chirping sounds from her shoulder. He recoils in fright when the little white owl suddenly starts wildly flapping its wings and piercingly chirping right inside the cabin. He leans toward the agitated bird. He asks what caused such a commotion, but when he scans the area through the window, nothing is visible, only the dense greenery of the forest. Turning back to the warrior for an answer, he asks if she sees anything. Her face hardens, and she, calling his name, confirms a dangerous monster is indeed nearby. A part of the journey crumbles to dust. From the forest crawls a massive moose-like creature with a glow in its eyes and sharp teeth, looming over the path. It growls, hisses hot breath, thick clouds of steam rise in the air as it fixates its predatory gaze on the transport. It trembles, he notes. Although this creature is smaller than the titans they have already faced, it is no less terrifying. The warrior recognizes the beast as a deek and warns that its size is deceptive, its strength is deadly, and could turn into a disaster if they are attacked. Because of this, he suggests trying to sneak past more quietly. She watches the monster with growing anxiety, noticing it has already taken a posture of full aggression, ready for immediate confrontation. Without warning, the monster unleashes a deafening, bone-chilling roar, displaying its rows of blade-like teeth, unmistakably declaring hostility. Before them looms she, a creature that usually stays away from main roads and remains obedient if not provoked. Genome explains, this particular animal behaves not typically excited, and fleeing into the car is a vain hope. Its speed far exceeds that of a horse, and it will relentlessly catch up with them, regardless of any terrain. She draws her blade, a sharp, metallic ring-end, orders Shaidru to remain completely still and silent. He looks at her. His face darkens, and fear and uncertainty mingle as the weight of the moment finally dawns on him. The warrior stands firm, and her resolve strengthens as she vows to protect Shaidru and the rest of their group. Weapon at the ready, she prepares to face this monstrous onslaught head-on. Suddenly, the beast lunges forward with terrifying speed. Its gigantic figure blurs into a solid mass of fur and muscles. From the safety of the car, Shaidru can only watch in shock as the creature closes in within moments. Its speed defies all laws of weight. She intercepts the attack with a rapid maneuver. She dashed upward and struck the monster's head in mid-jump. The jab is brutal proof of the elf's agility against the raw power of D. A sharp clang rings out as her sword cuts into the thick hide of the creature, but the beast barely flinches. Its shining eyes, full of murderous intent, are fixed on the prey. Landing lightly, she quickly changes position without lowering her guard as the clash intensifies. The ground trembles with every move of the monster, which presses harder and harder on the soil. Her eyes widen a sudden alarm when Deke delivers a powerful blunt kick. Massive hooves slam into the ground with bone-crushing force. The impressive scale of this creature's strength becomes eerily obvious. She barely avoids the deadly stomping of the giant beast. The ground cracks under its weight. Despite the pressure, she maintains concentration, breaking through the chaos and preparing a counterattack, releasing a flash of magical energy. The warrior's movements falter. A sharp pain pierces the leg and it twists in pain. From a safe spot in the car, Shaidru shouts anxiously, asking what happened, but she quickly waves it off, saying it's just the leg hurting, and she needs a moment to apply a bit more grass. He watches helplessly, his thoughts racing in panic, searching for any way to help, while the deceptive feint continues its relentless attack. The elf is drawn outside into a desperate dance of survival, barely managing to slip under the huge, snapping jaws of the creature tearing forward at a terrifying speed. A sudden thought strikes his head as he looks at the tablet, whether he can add a certain function and change their fate. a boldly purposeful exclamation, and he nervously starts touching the screen, deciding to activate the machine's hidden ability in a desperate attempt to turn the course of events. With renewed determination, he grabs the steering wheel, roars Gina's name, and declares he is rushing to her aid, then crashes the car directly into the side of the giant monster. The windshield frames a chaotic scene ahead. The beast looms nearby, unaware that the metal machine is already charging into battle. Shidru steps out of the camper van holding a small container, while Fuda lingers in the background. Meanwhile, Gina slides on the ground in a desperate maneuver, trying to slip away from the attack. She understands she must lead the beast away from her companions, even when behind, at her back, looms a huge, predatory monster, its heavy steps thunder on the ground. The warrior woman tears the air with a pleading cry. The voice drowns in despair as she tries to keep her distance from the creature. Suddenly, Shidru appears on the roof of the car, banging metal lids against each other and shouting at the top of his voice to lure the fool giant right to him. The monster, irritated by the noise, turns its predatory gaze away from Gina and lunges at the van. He activates the team with a decisive shout, and the machine tenses before the strike as he jumps to safety. A giant monster strikes the camper roof with all its might, using a huge hoof so hard that bones must crack, and a shockwave rolls around. Its weight is so unbearable that the vehicle's wheels sink deep into the soft ground, leaving Gina staring, eyes wide with shock. She watches in horror as a gigantic, deep monster looms with its entire mass over the camper and strikes, and the ground trembles from the force of the impact. The young man understands his plan is working. Since the handbrake was not engaged, the van under the beast's paw rolls like a toy on wheels. But the creature's roar so deafening jerks him and the little white owl with pure, irreversible fear. Due to the lack of friction, the massive hoof of the creature slides straight off the vehicle's roof, and having completely lost support, it begins to twitch wildly and thrash about chaotically. Momentum pushes the beast forward, and it crashes face first into the ground with a thunder, while the survivors stand like rooted, watching how the once formidable threat turns into a pile of fur and muscles. When the dust settles, the monster lies motionless on the forest floor, and Shidru approaches his battered car, noticing with a heavy heart. The solar panels are broken, and the roof is badly dented. He exhales for a moment, his face pales from the ordeal, and the glowing interface inside the van confirms that the emergency body reinforcement protocol worked, providing the necessary structural integrity to survive the trampling. Then he turns to his companions and bows low with a gesture of deep regret, with bitter reproach that he had to rely on their strength, even though he promised to protect them. But the elf warrior immediately dismisses his apology, insisting that without him, they would not have survived. Then she gestures toward the vehicle, her curiosity flared to the limit, despite its durability, and asks if this is his usual campy, leaving him momentarily speechless from the cultural misunderstanding with his modern transporter. She repeated the name with barely noticeable confusion, her brows furrowed as she tried to comprehend the word. Shidru quickly explained that it was simply a name he gave to his companion, so she wondered if it was a shortening of a much longer, more formal title. Seeing her acceptance of this idea, he realized she truly believed that this chariot was a living creature, some familiar being, because the machine had abilities far beyond local understanding. He decided it was best to leave this misunderstanding as is, and later invite her inside the beast so she could see everything with her own eyes. He officially introduced the two of them, announcing that from now on the ship would be called Campy. With relief, since the creature supposedly was unharmed, she waved off the external damage, saying it was just a few ruffled hairs. The smile returned as the tension finally eased. Standing before the gigantic fallen deek, she noticed she had never seen it eat anything, and guessed, if the monster were fed its own meat, it could regain its strength. Shidru was stunned not only by the advice itself, but also by the revelation that the flesh of this creature was considered a high-quality, nutritious delicacy. He noted that since her hunt was interrupted by the beast's arrival, she should take the trophies of their victory with her. He suggested using the vehicle's storage to transport the huge haul, and she immediately agreed while preparing to start the processing. With practiced ease, she gets to work, biting into the thick skin and muscles on the monster's leg, cutting through them. When the storage space inside the car began to reach its limit, she marveled at how much it could hold, yet still feared that leaving the rest of the meat behind would be a waste. Watching her work, Shidru suddenly remembered a specific feature he had seen before: limitless storage capable of solving their problem. He accessed the internal interface and saw only 3 points remained to spend on upgrades. He really wanted to enable automatic repair, which could fix external damage, but infinite storage cost 2 points. He had to choose between utility and maintenance. He listens while Gina explains the enormous value of the monster deek. Its meat, hide, and horns will sell for a lot of money and bring joy to everyone in her village. And it is then that he understands how dear the people from her home are to her. She looked at him directly with a soft, poignant melancholy and confessed she had no family of her own. Because of her loneliness, she continues, it was the peasants who showed her true kindness, and now she feels a deep, inevitable need to repay this debt by any means. He watches her, stunned by the weight of her gratitude. Feeling the heavy atmosphere she created, she quickly apologizes for bringing up such overly personal matters, but he gently assures her there is no need to worry. He freezes for a moment. A quiet, understanding smile passes over his face as he comprehends the depth of her connection to his community from a sudden burst of determination, and he orders her to wait just a moment while he goes to consult with Campy, leaving her there in mild surprise. Glancing at the interface, he chooses the Infinite Storagia upgrade that promises not only limitless cargo space, but also a temporal stasis pause. Time in the compartment stops every time the door closes. The van stands ready. Outside it is unremarkable, but inside it hides an infinite, eternal emptiness capable of bearing and carrying to the village the full weight of their loot. Shidru opens the camper's back door and checks with the navigation system that this is indeed the correct entrance. In the small compartment, a dark, swirling vortex hums, filled with strange magnetic energy. He understands the upgrade works perfectly, so he encourages Jinal her bring bigger pieces of the beast. She freezes in impressed silence as a huge chunk of meat effortlessly drags into the swirling void and instantly disappears. She easily lifts the huge deer antler, asking if they can fit such a giant. She only freezes with delight, impressed by the incredible physical strength of the elf who handles the heavy trophy effortlessly. When the giant horns are pulled into a tiny hole, she asks with wide-open eyes if this transport just swallowed it. He explains, this is the unique power of the camper. It can store a huge volume of cargo, regardless of its physical size. He suggests dismantling the rest of the creature, so they can take all the meat and valuable hide. She eagerly agrees, sincerely and deeply thanking him for helping provide such a vital resource to her people. Together they set to work under the open sky, carefully removing the hide and disassembling the carcass of the huge animal, preparing it for transport. Piece by piece, large parts of the monster are pulled into the van storage to search for the laws of physics as they disappear through the small gate into the infinite space inside. When the task was completed, they took everything apart separately. She casts one last glance at the clearing where the battle took place and gets into the vehicle with him ready to start the journey back to her village. She leans out the window of the moving carriage, her eyes burning with excitement as the wind wildly lashes through her hair. They make their way through treacherous terrain. The young man steps forward and guides the giant machine through the narrow mountain pass, holding his hands high to show the way. Eventually, the couple stops near the cliff, gets out to admire the wild beauty of the surrounding peaks, while a white owl circles overhead. When the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the valley, the camper continues a steady, unwavering path through the wilderness. The elven warrior shines with joy inside the cabin, admiring the incredible speed of the transport with delight and cannot contain her excitement. She's carrying monster meat as a gift for a girl named Irina. She explains that Irina is a kind, cheerful girl who has been feeling unwell lately, so she hopes that the nutritious, rich meat will be just what she needs to regain her strength. He listens carefully to her story and nods. It is necessary to get to the village as soon as possible to deliver that urgently needed aid. She suddenly stretches out her hand forward and exclaims with joy as the village finally appears on the horizon, while he silently contemplates hope. This first visit to a human settlement might provide clues on how to return to his own world. He approaches the rural settlement, a cluster of wooden buildings pressed against a rocky backdrop and covered by a sturdy perimeter fence. From above, the guard on duty shields his eyes from the light, squinting at the approaching figures until his face changes to pure shock. He recognizes the travelers. Seeing familiar faces, the elven warrior energetically waves her hand and calls out to Eben and Belk that she has safely returned to the village. In response, two men leap from their posts, hastily running across the open field to meet their long-absent comrade with relief. Reaching her, she begins to recount the exhausting journey, recalling encounters with Mudivora and Deke, and credits her companion for their survival. The guard cannot believe his ears. Stepping forward, the young man introduces himself as Shigeru, but the guards Eben and Belk scrutinize him with obvious distrust, noting his slender build and unusual clothing unlike their sturdy gear. Sensing their doubt, she sharply intervenes and declares that he is a powerful summoner with incredible culinary skills, and the guards remain utterly stunned, wondering how cooking relates to their survival in the wild. He tries to show her even more of his wonders. She asks if he can introduce them to the camp with his taste for all things campy, but he can only offer embarrassed, confused silence in response to her inexhaustible energy. She lifts a huge boxy machine toward the astonished villagers, who can hardly believe the scale of this steel monster before. Two men even Belk freeze in shock, their mouths open as they try to comprehend whether this is some kind of stone golem or a strange new ally. In response to their confusion, she clarifies, earlier they encountered Deke and used this camp to bring the killer back to the village. Eben still doubts and does not believe such a creature can be moved so easily. Maybe they only returned one limb. To settle the matter, the back door of the car suddenly bursts open, and before the guards' eyes appears a real mountain of processed meat. They shudder in shock. They are completely baffled by this place, realizing that the entire Deke was truly returned intact, a trick that seems impossible. Seeing their surprised reaction, she beams with pride and explains that this is the true power of Shaidru and his tamed Campi. The guards instantly change their tone, bow their heads and apologize for their previous disrespect, now perceiving the young man as a master of great skill. Word about the incredible haul spreads through the settlement like wildfire, and very soon a crowd gathers to marvel at the huge food supplies and the mysterious guest who helps secure them. While the villagers discuss the monster controlled by the newcomer, he feels a wave of relief, thankful that their knowledge of magical creatures is flexible enough to accept a controlled motorized vehicle and without new suspicions. He watches as a young girl named Irina suddenly rushes out of the village. Her face lights up with relief as she sinks into Gina in a fierce, strong embrace. The girl had been wildly panicking from fear, but the elf gently soothes her. She has no wounds and everything is already fine. She promises the excited child a feast that will satisfy everyone and recalls the huge catch of meat they brought with them. The child's eyes widen with disbelief and hunger, and the elf laughs, savoring the moment of silence after a long journey. His face remains calm, but in his eyes a lingering nostalgia flashes for a moment as he looks at the united community and the simple joy of their reunion. He listens while the guards, Eben and Belk, shift their gaze to him and ask if he will stay in the village for long. He explains his situation, comparing himself to a lost traveler, trying to find the way to where he belongs and not knowing where his path will lead next. He seizes the moment and asks if they recognize the name of his homeland, Japan, but the guards can only respond with empty looks. They admit they have never heard of it and advise, although the village elder travels well and knows about the world beyond its borders, even he may not have answers to what this stranger seeks. They firmly insist that he must stay and recover in the guest house, despite the lack of any information. The guards refuse to let a person who helped the village sleep under the open sky. They insist hospitality is the minimum they can offer to someone who supported their kin. Their statement is met with a loud roar as they announce a lavish feast, a celebration of Gina's return and the arrival of their new guest. He is bewildered by the sudden wild enthusiasm of the villagers. They raise shouts and begin preparing for the festivities. Against the backdrop of growing noise, she turns to him with a warm, sincere expression and officially welcomes him to Hawkin Village. He catches her gaze and, for a moment, the weight of his journey lightens, thanks to her kindness and the promise of a safe place to rest. She watches the village of Hakim as it settles under the endless starry sky. Its roofs are silhouettes against the backdrop of distant mountains. She follows the sounds of the celebration to the very heart of the settlement there. The festive mood sweeps like a wave, and the long table is bursting with an abundance of local treats and drinks. The fighter stands at the edge of the gathering and watches as the peasants bustle around huge spits. Thick chunks of meat sizzle and hiss over the open fire. She listens as nearby guards laugh heartily, assuring the young traveler there will be enough for everyone here. They explain that some of the meat is kept for trade, but there will be plenty at the banquet and insist he and his companion have honestly earned the right to eat their fill. They watch as the meat reaches the perfect golden crust, and the cooks begin to cut it into thick, juicy slices. They release spicy steam into the night air. Then the cooks placed before him a huge dish of freshly carved roast beef, and just the sheer amount of this dish made his eyes widen in disbelief, was urged to savor it to his heart's content. He feels a rich, almost viscous aroma. It nearly overwhelms him. Nearby is only the smell, but saliva is already flowing in his mouth. With great anticipation, he is ready to take his first bite of the legendary Dekmi. A small white owl impatiently perches on a wooden fence, its large eyes fixed on the place from which a delicious smell comes. The air is filled with the sizzling of juicy meat, and a deep hunger awakens in its heart. Next to it on the table lies a thick piece of meat on a heated stone. It sizzles and crackles as it is fried. From the perfectly browned surface rises steam, spreading a rich aroma that has already enchanted the little bird. Shaidru freezes before the first bite, quietly thanks and presses the knife into the steak, and immediately he is pierced by an unexpected texture. Although the meat is taken from such a gigantic, lean creature, the blade glides through it with astonishing ease. When the knife sinks deeper, the tender fibers seem to part, releasing a new portion of juice. The meat looks incredibly juicy, much more tender than its rough beginning might suggest. He finally tastes it, and the explosion of flavor hits so wildly that his eyes go wide, and his breath catches. It's a wild, rich taste that far surpasses any beef or pork he has ever known, a spicy essence that seems to vibrate through his entire body. Eben watches with a confident smile and remarks that the meat is incredibly high quality because the creature managed to accumulate a huge amount of magical energy in its massive form. Enchanted by the very sensation, the young man asks if the magic present is what creates such a deep flavor. The experienced guard explains, magic flows through the bodies of all monsters, fueling their ability to breathe fire or harden their skin like iron. Then he begins to describe magic as the very essence of life and the power of this world. Eating the flesh of such creatures can instantly drive away fatigue and even ease minor ailments, so it is a valuable source of vitality. Shaidru listens without looking away. His head buzzes as he realizes the scale of the monster that provided such nourishment. Despite a brief worry about whether such strong food is safe for someone from his world, he cannot stop. He continues to eat and savor every crumb. Across the table, Eben watches the youth's enthusiasm with a warm, grateful smile and feels deep gratitude for the help Shaidru has given. He looks into his bowl and even explains why meat is so scarce in their remote village. Usually, only small pieces appear in the soup. Large prey like deek is rare, and the state most often takes the majority of any substantial game as taxes. Glancing at the festive crowd, he sees pure joy on the villagers' faces as they feast. The rare abundance of meat has turned the mood into a true celebration, and he finally realizes how his hunting has affected them. Returning to the conversation, he listens as even Muses suggests. Gina probably insisted on bringing back the entire monster precisely to feed the whole village. He silently agrees, understanding the elf's hidden kindness. The warrior woman is in a wonderful mood, laughing, thanking him for fulfilling her request to transport the huge creature. Eben joins in the laughter, loudly urging him to drink and enjoy the celebration without hesitation. Their meal is interrupted by a joyful shout. A young girl runs swiftly toward them. She calls to him, addressing him with a familiar warmth. Her face lights up with a bright smile. She offers him a bowl of soup and explains that she cooked it from the best vegetables from her family's garden as thanks for helping Gina. Eben confirms that the vegetables from her family are indeed the finest in the village, enhancing her sincere offering. But her bright smile quickly fades as she is overcome by a severe coughing fit. He worries and asks if she still feels unwell, even suggesting she go to her mother and rest. As the girl leaves, a dignified gray-bearded old man with a long white beard approaches the table. He addresses the young man with solemn respect and asks if he is Lord Shaidru, a title that completely throws him off balance. He freezes mid-gesture until the village elder, Libido, finally introduces himself, apologizing for being late due to a meeting in the neighboring village. The elder expresses deep gratitude for the generous meat and furs, emphasizing how necessary such resources are for the remote settlement, but the young man objects, saying it was no trouble at all. Changing the subject of conversation, he asks about the features of elves, particularly their long, pointed ears. He notes that since his arrival, he has only seen Gina, the only elf woman, and inquires of the elder about her origin and family history. The elder's gaze becomes distant as he recalls a time over 15 years ago when only humans lived in the village. He describes the day when an elf woman named Martel arrived in the village, carrying the young Gina on her back. Although the villagers hesitated to approach the race they had never seen, they allowed Martel to stay after she begged for a place to live. She made a home in an abandoned stable and tirelessly raised her daughter, tending the outskirts and using water magic to survive in isolation. She became an indispensable part of the village. With her unique gifts, she supported the community. During droughts, she called water to quench the parched fields, and when a neighbor was injured, she was immediately there to wash and gently care for their wounds. This dedication became most evident on the night when fire threatened to devour the village's winter supplies without hesitation. She unleashed her full power to extinguish the raging tongues of flame before they turned survival to ashes. However, this effort came at an extraordinary cost. Although the villagers did not fully understand the nature of her magic, it was clear such a feat drained nearly all her life force. She fainted and did not regain consciousness for several days, leaving the community in a state of anxious vigilance. Years passed and the bond between the two elves and the villagers only grew stronger. They were no longer strangers. They ate at the same table, lived in a real home, and the local children accepted the young girl into their games as if she had always been one of them. 7 years ago, this heavy, one and only thing was broken when it was suddenly taken by a rare and relentless disease. Her death was swift, and the village did not have time to prepare for the emptiness she left behind. After her death, the whole village mourned the loss of their protector and friend. They looked at the orphan girl she left behind and made a collective vow to raise her as their own so that she would never truly be alone. Returning to the present, the elder lets the guests into the conversation and admits, despite their care, the girl still carries the heavy burden of alienation, trying to be useful as if that could justify her very existence among people. The young man listens attentively. His gaze flashes with deep understanding across his face as he says he knows exactly what it is to feel such lonely isolation. He reflects on the strange shadow of loneliness that can persist even amid kindness, on the feeling that he is inherently different, which drives him to work exhaustingly just to feel that he belongs. He listens carefully as the elder tells about the burden of Gina's legacy. She was the only one of her kind in the village, so she could not help but feel deep alienation and loneliness born simply from the fact that she was different. Looking intently at him, the elder continues and expresses gratitude. It was someone like him who cared for her. He notes that traveling with the forest owl is proof that he is not an ordinary man. These words unsettle the young man, and the plump creature emits a soft cuckoo, as if confirming its own significance. Then he gently pats him on the shoulder and announces that it is time for the elders to go to bed for the night, inviting the guests to stay and have a good time. The young man thanks them, feeling the weight of everything that happened during the day, while the little owl comfortably settles on his head. A sudden thought strikes his head's eyes widen sharply in shock. He has surprisingly completely forgotten to ask the elder about his original world, although Eben had earlier assured him that the village leader knows well the lands beyond their borders. He repeatedly recalls his wasted opportunity, while Gina approaches with a warm smile and asks if he is enjoying the celebration. He quickly dismisses his worries and assures her, the celebration is wonderful and the food is truly incredibly delicious. She tells him that she will escort him to the guest house whenever he feels the need to rest. Acknowledging his fatigue, he decides it is time to go to bed and asks if she will lead the way. Beside her, he suddenly feels a strange discomfort wash over him. Covering his face, he reflects on how knowing the history of her family has suddenly made their conversations so difficult. She casts a surprised look at him, not understanding why he changed so abruptly. The path leads to a modest wooden cabin, under the quiet night sky, a peaceful refuge, where the weary traveler can finally find rest. Shaidru leaned back and stared at the ceiling while pondering the absurdity of his situation. Just 2 nights ago, he was at his usual camping spot, but one night of sleep transported him to this strange world where monsters and elves exist. What unsettles him is that everyone here understands Japanese, and even his fluffy companion, Fuda, is considered a monster here. His thoughts jump to the huge camper van he already has. He named the vehicle Campy. Although spending points to unlock new features is really useful, the level logic still remains a mystery to him. He pulls out his smartphone and scrolls to the photo taken on the day the car was delivered. Seeing himself standing next to the dealer, in front of the van feels like going back an eternity, sharply contrasting with his current reality. While he continues to study the photo, the flickering flame of the candle by the bed casts shadows around the room. A strange, stubborn feeling of anxiety creeps in his chest. Something doesn't add up in this photograph, but he can't figure out what exactly. The weight of the day's events finally presses down, and the eyelids fill with heaviness. Confusion and questions merge into a haze until exhaustion takes over. Outside, the village sinks into a deep, completely quiet sleep under the starry sky. Deciding that there is no point in finishing his thoughts, he finally gives himself over to sleep. The next morning, he goes outside into the fresh air, stretches his muscles as the sun rises. Inside, the little white owl remains curled up on the bed, a fluffy ball in the morning light. He approaches the camper van. It stands next to the wooden house, already ready and waiting. The new day brings a sense of renewed purpose, even as the mysteries of this world still loom. He starts the morning by checking the camper's status on the screen, and happily notes that the water and fuel tanks are completely full. This confirms his theory that the vehicle restores resources overnight, but he frowns upon noticing the odometer having traveled only 70 kilometers. He realizes he is still far from the 1,000-kilometer mark needed for the next level. His eyes widen with surprise as he notices changes on the display. His maintenance points have increased to 2. This discovery puts him at a dead-end. Did not expect any increase without a corresponding upgrade in the overall vehicle level. Huddled in a tight space, he quietly whispers about his desire for the instruction manual to explain these cryptic mechanics. He wonders where the new glasses came from, and thinks about whether he earned them by defeating the monsters yesterday, yet still doubts it since it was actually Ginny who had to fight. Suddenly he is interrupted by noise outside and turns his head to the window. There he sees Gina, Martel, and the village guards gathered in a state of agitation. Their voices rise into the morning air as they discuss something incredibly important. It turns out to investigate. He finds a gathering of magical stones scattered on the ground near a large wooden box. The place takes his breath away as he tries to understand where these valuable things came from. He joins the growing crowd of peasants, shielding his eyes from the morning sun and looking around the area. In the air is a thick mixture of excitement and confusion. Everyone is trying to comprehend the morning's events. His attention is drawn away by the crowd. It parts, and an elderly woman named Yuru with a stone expression on her face approaches him. She only comes closer and he already greets her, speaking abruptly and immediately, asking for her view on the monsters that, according to rumors, had already been defeated earlier that morning. She stands before Martel and Gina. Her presence causes the silence to deepen as she delivers a stunning revelation. Martel's face pales with disbelief, and she asks if the news about the young man's involvement could really be true, but the elder woman remains stern, no reassurance, only lingering seriousness. She brought grim news, and the finality of the situation was voiced by the elder. He declared that the arena was no longer salvageable, and that there were no options left. This news hits him like a physical blow. His thoughts instantly rush back to that young girl he had seen only recently. Beyond the elder's words, a heavy silence hangs over the gathered village, and a somber quiet settles on the group. He watches as the elder identifies the disease as dirt and ailment. This name seems to carry a dark history within the village itself, dating back to the times when Martel still used it. Turning his gaze to Gina, he sees the warrior's stoic focus crack. Her eyes reflect deep, personal pain as the weight of the situation finally reaches her. The explanation continues. It outlines the cruel course of the disease. First comes a deceptive asymptomatic period, then suddenly, it bursts in violently, red rashes and high fever that claim victims in less than 3 days. Mariel, devastated by the news, staggers, her strength failing until others rush to her. While he desperately insists that medicine might exist in a distant town, the elder quickly crushes this hope, saying the 3-day journey to Odorio is too long, given how much time the arena has left. He freezes motionless, and the desperate voices of the peasants fade into a dull hum as he processes the impossible timeline and the impending tragedy. He breaks the suffocating silence, steps forward, and calls Gina. His voice is steady, though surrounded by utter despair, and this gives a sense of sudden change in determination. He caught her attention. Her gaze sharply widened as she turned to him, and a moment of hope or embarrassment flashed across her face from his sudden intervention. He is surrounded by grieving peasants and the burden of their shared despair. He lowers his gaze. His thoughts are already racing, outlining options, while others remain frozen in grief. He forces himself to focus, mentally organizing the facts. Dirt of disease is a deadly illness tied to a specific world, which he has never heard of, and young Arena has already fallen victim to it. The progression is rapid, death instantaneous. Mathematics is cruel. When the city is 3 days' ride on horseback, there and back all 6. This is far beyond the 2 days the Arena gave her to live before the disease takes her. Looking back at his companion and the little white owl, he suddenly realized, since the moment he arrived in this world, only about 70 kilometers have passed, a tiny fraction of the journey to the medicine. He estimates that the city is about 240 kilometers away together. It comes to almost 500, so for a horse this is simply impossible in the remaining time, but maybe not for someone else. His thoughts stop at his modern transport, a full tank and a range of 500 kilometers, so he calculates. Even on rough, unpaved terrain, traveling slowly, he can make it within 16-24 hours. Despite the promising numbers, he remains cautious. He fears for fuel efficiency on these primitive roads and the very real threat of encountering terrain that motorized transport simply cannot overcome. He weighs the grim possibilities, acknowledging that due to the high center of gravity, the camper easily overturns on uneven terrain. One careless step and the vehicle will plunge off a cliff, ending everything. Outside the environment, the threat of monsters like Deke looms no less. He is afraid. A deadly encounter will leave him only regrets in the last moments. He feels the weight of the decision pressing on him, and his brow furrows as he stares into the unknown road ahead. He finds a clearer insight that cuts through his fear. If he stays aside and lets the arena die, the regret will be far more unbearable than any physical danger. He abruptly stepped forward and, gathering determination, announced to the assembled group that he would go himself. His sudden outburst leaves Jin and the village elders stunned. Disbelief freezes on their faces at this unexpected proposal. He quickly outlines his offer. He says that if someone who knows the route and the specific medicine goes with him, he can deliver it to the town and back in record time. But Eben remains extremely skeptical and asks how this is even possible if even the fastest horses couldn't handle this road. In response, a massive metal frame of his camper looms behind Hema Strange and powerful presence in the village clearing. Raising his hand to the vehicle, he declares with unshakable confidence that with this machine, the impossible journey can be completed. Preparation begins in earnest. Fingers slide into leather gloves, and straps tighten with a series of sharp clicks. The gear is secured for the journey ahead. She decisively steps forward and offers her services as protection for the expedition. Jin insists she can handle any monsters they might encounter. Herselfan, these words bring relief to Shijido and Martel. They both understand. An elf capable of magic is an invaluable asset for the dangerous road to the town. He decides to join as well, immediately noting that knowledge of the city Odorio and his connections with local merchants will be extremely important. The elder explains that Granny Yoru will stay behind doing everything to keep Irina's condition stable while they are away. Guard Eben voices the grim truth of their situation. The medicine is too expensive. Even if they pool together all the village's meager savings, it probably won't be enough. The only hope is to sell everything down to the last crumb, both meat and hide, to survive the deek monster the size of a mountain that Gina defeated the previous day. While the meat is being salted for transport, they discuss the logistics of the plan. A heavy uncertainty hangs in the air. They are gnawed by the thought. Will the proceeds from the deek really cover the expenses, and will they even manage to turn around and return with the medicine in less than 2 days? He proposes a radical alternative, to take Irina with him so she can receive the medicine as soon as they buy it. But Eben hesitatish knows Shajido is not used to long trips, and a whole day on the road in a carriage exhausts even a healthy adult, let alone a sick child. The man looks intently at the amazing mechanical beast Shajido, brought into their world, and weighs the risks. If Irina is too weak, the journey itself could kill her before they even reach the town. Now everything depends on how fast this monster can move. She rushes up with a basket of bread and cheese, giving much-needed supplies for the road. Shajido thanks her as the group prepares to depart. They band together. If they don't leave immediately, the delay could cost Irina her life. He looks back at the village square and has no idea where Gina went. The elder says she went to visit Irina one last time before leaving, and they left him waiting by the supplies. In the quiet little house, she stands over the bed of a young girl. Irina's face is red, sweat streams down it in rivulets. Her breathing falters as the fever takes hold. The elf's expression is heavy. It holds both compassion and firm resolve as she looks at the suffering child. Leaning closer, she whispers a solemn promise to the sleeping child. She swears to return with the medicine that will save her life, no matter the cost. For a moment, the morning silence is torn by the deep mechanical roar of the engine coming to life, announcing the start of their mission. The giant white van rushes forward, kicking up a cloud of dust, just leaving behind the safe silence of the village and beginning its desperate journey into the unknown. It shakes wildly, and the metal frame growls and groans as the wheels crawl through the uneven, unpaved ground of the wild terrain, testing the limits of the vehicle. Gripping the steering wheel, he sees that the farther they drive away from civilization, the faster the road deteriorates. Beside him, the elf woman asks if the path will continue to narrow, and he confirms her fears, admitting that the journey is already proving harder than they expected. Behind them, the old man was completely overwhelmed not by fear of the strange machine, but by a debilitating attack of seasickness. He slumped in his seat, his face turned pale, his eyes rolled back in the driver's surprise, as he did not expect the old man to be so affected by the ride. He looms over the face, pale, struggling to gather himself after the nauseating ride. Gina asks if he is okay, hinting that some fresh air wouldn't hurt him, while Shijido watches from the driver's seat, worried that even with the camper's capabilities, an old man might not withstand this bumpy road. Casting a glance beyond the horizon, they see even more treacherous spaces ahead. Broken stone outcrops jut into the sky like cracked teeth. The endless, uninhabited landscape erases the white transport from sight, emphasizing the complete solitude of their road. Despite his discomfort, the elder nods toward the path ahead and explains that the wide road lies further on. Shijido accepts the advice, understanding that as soon as they leave the car, the ground seems much more stable and controllable. Soon the journey resumes. The camper starts rattling and groaning as it makes its way along the uneven road. Inside the cabin, the sound of metal straining and scraping against the rocky path echoes a constant reminder of the harsh conditions they are currently facing. Suddenly, a small creature with long ears darts across the road, barely managing to avoid the heavy tires. Its swift movement a brief flash of life in the barren wasteland around. The body shatters into pieces as the wheel crashes into a deep rut, and the frame is pierced by a harsh jolt. Shigeto's eyes flash with anxiety. He grips the steering wheel tightly and feels the car losing steady traction. The giant hull wobbles precariously to the side, threatening to topple over at any moment. Inside, the cabin turns into a blurred whirl of motion. Gina and the little owl lose their balance. Their faces carve out sudden fear as the world outside the window jerks at a crazy, nauseating angle. Desperate to somehow stabilize them, Gina shouts for Shigeto to activate the canopy's protective membrane. He turns to Herhai's face completely puzzled as he tries to comprehend her terminal command amid all this chaos. He tightly grips the steering wheel as the gigantic carriage wildly lurches to one side and is about to overturn. Nearby, the elven warrior shouts in fear, her eyes wide open from the sudden horror of the near disaster. Behind the old man throws with the force of a blow, and his voice merges into the chorus of panic as the world collapses at an impossible angle. With a bone-breaking rumble, the heavy machine tears off and with furious force strikes back into the rocky ground. Its weight finally settles, and under the load the suspension groans dully. When the dust settles, the warrior woman bows her head in shame and apologizes incessantly for failing her duty to scout the monsters she stumbled over. He immediately reassures her that tiny creatures are almost impossible to notice under the giant armor of the vehicle, and thanks fate that they still survived and remained on their feet. Despite calm words, he remains deeply disturbed, understanding. Even if driving barely crawling 20 km per hour, one mistake in control can turn into a fatal rollover in this treacherous terrain. Seeking a way out, he shifts his gaze to the flickering control panel interface and notes. Now he has 2 items for system upgrades. He runs through the list of available functions from automatic repair to basic conveniences and searches for something that will guarantee their safety. His gaze lingers on the auto repair option, but the requirements to earn more points remain a mystery. He knows, first and foremost, he must ensure the immediate survival of everyone on board, especially young Arena. Without trembling, he selects the center of gravity stability function, hoping it will be enough to keep them grounded. Immediately, a confirmation message flashes on the screen. The new system is active. Now the vehicle will automatically balance in real time, providing critical protection against the deadly risk of rollover. He firmly presses the accelerator with his foot, and the engine responds inside the cabin with a powerful, rhythmic throb, a muffled, chesty rumble. The sudden surge of power catches his companions off guard. Their eyes widen as the car prepares to burst forward. With stabilization on, the huge white motorhome wildly tears through uneven ground. Wheels madly crush the mud, and it maintains a steady, unbreakable course. Noticing the change, the elf warrior remarks that the ride has become amazingly smooth. He nods in confirmation, confident that this new stability will allow them to cover more ground in less time. Despite the progress, she remains attentive, noticing with what wildly focused gaze he approached the vehicle's internal systems. She voices her concern. Is he taking on too much, pressing too hard on the machine itself? He gives a calming smile and explains that he is not trying to break his own limits. He insists, both he and the machine are simply doing everything possible to save the young girl Irina, reflecting the same dedication she has already shown. The journey continues relentlessly. Only a car with a white speck of heat paves the way through the boundless, wild, and rocky terrain under the open sky. From behind, the village elder leans closer to join the conversation as they make their way through an especially rocky section of the path. The elders advise maintaining this pace for some more time, and he replies that they have already been on the road for 10 hours and are currently on schedule for the best arrival time. She adds a warning. With monsters, there is always a threat, so the main thing is to reach the safe city before nightfall. She watches him closely, noticing how hard the journey has affected his tired face. She shows deep concern, realizing she should have noticed his fatigue earlier. Since morning, she has been rushing along these unfamiliar, broken roads, and it is already evident his mental energy is extremely depleted. She insists they need to stop immediately. Even the elder agrees, everyone needs to rest and eat, but the driver remains steadfast. He says the vehicle won't move without him, and with the unknown ahead, they cannot afford to waste a single minute. He expresses deep gratitude for everything the young man has done, acknowledging that it was an age-old problem of the village and had nothing to do with him personally. He further calms the tired traveler. Even if everything goes not as he hoped, no one in the village will have any idea to blame him in the end. The young man rejects the very thought of defeat. He says he simply could not live with himself if something happened to Irina, her family, or the rest of the village. Their suffering is a burden he refuses to take upon himself. Looking at the carriage that brought them all the way here, he reflects on how kind the villagers were to him. He believes that the true purpose of this machine is to bring joy to people, and that is why he must keep pushing forward. He says he wants everyone to be able to smile again. The elder eventually gives in and promises to do everything he can, but warns, do not overwork yourself, because the medicine will be useless if something happens to the one carrying it. He grips the steering wheel, his face frozen with determination despite the fatigue. Behind, Gina vows to support him. If he reaches his limit, she will carry both him and the elder for the rest of the way. He only nods, his gaze fixed on the road, agreeing that they must not allow such a terrible end. The bulky truck roars and rushes through the barren wasteland, scattering dust as it pushes itself forward into the unknown. When the sun hides behind the horizon, the sky shimmers with deep purples and gray hues. It is a sign that a long, hard night has come. Under the cover of darkness, the young driver checks the map, irritated that the navigation system shows only places he has already visited. Nearby, the elf warrior notes, thick clouds have swallowed the star sign, there is no celestial guidance, and the headlights try to pierce through the suffocating fog. He turns to the elder and asks if the map will help find the city. The old man explains, maps are a rare tool for merchants and pilgrims. For most, the route is etched into memory and recognized by familiar landmarks, but now they are hidden by the night. The weight of this journey begins to press down Squints as he realizes they have been on the road for 14 hours, much longer than he himself could have guessed in the most pessimistic calculations. He knows they cannot wait for dawn. The urgency of their mission allows no delay. Suddenly, a small white owl stirs. Its wings beat the air, and it flies right into the cramped cabin. Both he and the warrior freeze in stunned silence as the creature prepares to move. The bird bursts out of the vehicle, its feathers flare with bright, guiding light as it soars into the darkness. It becomes a beacon and a void, carving a path through the roadless night. It gave a sharp, urgent cry, and the bioluminescent glow flared brighter as it circled above the transport. Gina suddenly paled from the sudden realization and immediately turned to Shigeto, asking for permission to climb onto the roof to get a better view of the path ahead. Without waiting for a formal answer, she jumped up together with elven grace, landing firmly on the camper's roof. From the height, the white owl continued to lead the way through the darkening sky, as if cutting through the darkness. From the new vantage point, the horizon finally gave a faint glimmer of hope. Far away, the flickering lights of a small town hidden among the hills, the only ray of civilization amid the endless wilderness. She exclaimed with joy. Her face lit up as soon as she confirmed. The town's lights were finally within sight, and she urged the whole group forward, giving them strength. Inside the cabin, Shigeto squinted into the darkness, saw only shadows. The elder calmly explained, the elf's vision far surpasses that of humans, and the leggy senses are even more amazing. They allow one to find a path where others go blind. Hearing this, Gina lowered her gaze and said that she and the owl would give directions and warn of any obstacles on their way, so Shigeto could fully concentrate on breaking through the difficult terrain. The transport rumbled rhythmically, crossing uneven ground, and the headlights cut through the night. Shigeto gripped the steering wheel tightly, filled again with determination. They were only one last push away from reaching their destination. Finally, huge wooden gates of the town loomed before Themen, the walls, at height, guarded for centuries. The tired travelers gathered together near the entrance, and the long night journey came to an end. He looks exhausted but greets the group's arrival with a relieved smile. The village elder, Libido, expresses complete sincere surprise. They say they managed to reach Adrio in just one day, even though the journey stretched over 15 exhausting hours. Gina, noticing his fatigue, asks if he is holding up. He assures her he is fine but admits, as soon as they can, he plans to restance they exchange the Deke remains for some currency. At the city entrance, the group is stopped by a guard for inspection. Libido steps forward and presents an official passage certificate issued by the village leadership to confirm their business. The guard explains the procedure. All weapons must be registered, and any trade operations will be subject to clear taxes depending on the goods. The guard's professional restraint suddenly disappears as his gaze falls on a small white creature sitting on the young man's shoulder. He gasps involuntarily with fear. Recognizing the bird, he says it is the legendary forest owl, a creature rumored to bring incredible luck to anyone fortunate enough to see it even once. The guard exclaims that such a thing almost never happens near human settlements, and, because of this, the whole company is amazed at the respect the owl commands even from him. As soon as they are allowed entry, the group moves quietly through the streets toward the merchant guild. libido leads the way, eager to turn this deep carcass into the money they so desperately need. As they walk, the young man reflects on how much his feathered companion has become a local celebrity, while the owl only lets out a soft, indifferent hoot. Their movement is abruptly stopped by heavy wooden doors. A narrow slit slides aside and reveals a pair of indifferent eyes. A voice from inside dryly informs that the establishment's working hours have long passed. Despite the urgency of the mission, the clerk demands they return the next day, no interest in their trouble. Despair grows in him. He begs the unseen clerk, emphasizing that someone's life hangs by a thread right now. His pleas go unanswered. Outside the window sits a cold, indifferent person who doesn't care whether their statement concerns life or death. Behind him, comrades watch the conversation with increasing anxiety, realizing the bureaucracy of this town may become their very first obstacle. Realizing that standard requests won't suffice, he shifts his gaze to the elven warrior standing nearby. Calmly and firmly looking, he asks if she will agree to help him with a specific matter. The village elder stands before the closed shop doors, the silence of the night weighing around him as he waits for a response. He leans toward the small service window. His voice is on the edge. He implores that the shop be opened because they cannot wait until dawn. From inside, the seller responds with slight annoyance. Such troubles should have been resolved during the day. Their conversation is abruptly cut off by a dazzling flash bursting behind the elder. Long, sharp shadows fall on the wooden walls, and both men freeze with eyes wide open in shock. From the very heart of the light, a figure descends with ethereal grace, her silhouette outlined by a flickering glow, and a small white owl sits on her head. She lands and immediately strikes a grand theatrical pose. Her voice thunders authoritatively as she proclaims herself the chosen elf and divine messenger of the great forest owl. Continuing her dramatic speech, she says she has traveled thousands of miles to save the people of this town and demands that the merchant buy the outfit she brought to support their cause. He is drawn into the spectacle. The elder sharply turns to the window and shouts for the doors to be opened immediately, while Shaidru watches the elf's performance with surprise and a slightly embarrassed feeling. The heavy doors finally creak open, and the merchant steps outside to inquire where the goods have gone. The elf gestures toward a large metal carriage, which begins to hum and glow with a bizarre swirling energy. He freezes in amazement as a huge pile of supplies materializes before him, ominous like the thunder of bones, crates, barrels, and sacks. The volume of this trophy is staggering, much more than he could have expected from a single delivery. He instantly gets to work, shouting at his household helpers to immediately get up and start inspecting the goods. Gina, still playing her role with the white little owl on her shoulder, politely thanks him, and Shaidru quietly apologizes for the sudden heavy workload. By urgent order, the team comes to life. Workers take on exhausting work weighing and sorting the catch. They drag heavy carcasses and barrels, and the air fills with the sounds of labor as they process the meat and materials brought from the forest. While the work continues, the dealer explains to the elderly man that even if his entire team works at full capacity to complete the assessment, it will take at least 2 hours. The elderly man agrees to the delay, understanding the scale of what they have entrusted to him. While they sort out the logistics, the senior's attention suddenly catches on Shaidru. He has turned pale and is swaying on his feet. The senior asks if an advance can be obtained to pay for medicine, noticing how the young man's condition is rapidly worsening. Suddenly, the tension becomes unbearable and he falls face first onto the hard ground with force. Gina and the elder grab him in fright, rushing to him as he lies motionless. The suddenness of the fall throws them into complete panic. She immediately drops to her knees, presses his head to her chest, and frantically asks if he can hear her, if he feels nauseous. Her voice is hoarse with anxiety as she calls for someone to bring water, her usual composure shattered after his sudden collapse. Despite her desperate pleas, he remains indifferent, eyes closed, and he sinks into a deep, quiet unconsciousness. The only sound is his shallow, even breathing, so the group freezes in tense silence, waiting for any sign of recovery. He was stuck in the elf's handslip, motionless, and his eyes closed in a deep, heavy sleep. The village elder approached. On his face was anxiety as he examined the young man. After a brief check, the elder decided it was only exhaustion, a natural consequence of the day's trials. While the elder, lost in thought, strokes his beard, the warrior looks down at his unconscious companion. Her brows are furrowed, her gaze filled with both anxiety and a protective instinct. Breaking the silence, the old man orders her to take the sleeping man to the resting place near the city entrance. He explains that he will go to the apothecary, himself armed with detailed notes that Granny Yoru provided about the necessary medicines and the symptoms of the young girl. At first, he reluctantly moves away from his side, but then she nods, understanding. It is surprising how easily she throws the man over her shoulder. Her strength does not match her delicate figure. She declares that she wants to settle him, and the elder, watching them walk away, can only marvel at her physical skill. Night falls on the quiet settlement. The silhouettes of buildings darken against the backdrop of the endless starry sky. Under the same canopy, his eyelids slowly flutter from the stars' gaze and his eyes open. The world flows with blurred dark silhouettes and distant light until consciousness returns. When his vision clears, her face appears above him, first tense anxiety, then a soft, relieved smile. She exhales with relief and notices that he has finally returned to them. He understands that he is lying quite comfortably on a wooden cart under a thick blanket. Holding his gaze on his companion, he weakly asks where exactly they are now, as he has not yet come to his senses after that sudden fall. He opens his eyes wide and freezes at what he sees finds himself comfortably settled on Gina's lap. The realization hits him as if physically. His face twists in pure, shocked disbelief as he looks down at her. Breaking upwards with a frantic jerk, he grabs his head. Thoughts race to piece together fragmented memories of their arrival and strange events in the shop. A sharp movement knocks the breath out, and he is completely lost. When the first shock subsides, he awkwardly apologizes, thanks her for her patience and for using her knees as a pillow. She just nods, confirming that he really overslept quite a long time. The burden of what happened slowly dawns on him and he groans, hiding his face in his hands, while a wave of sharp shame washes over him completely. This feeling is like disgrace to him, when after drinking too much his subordinates carry him home, and she only quietly giggles and nudges him to forget about it. Reaching for his device, he freezes in shock. While he was unconscious, 3 full hours passed. Nearby, a small white owl watches intently, staring wide and motionless as the reality of the lost time finally dawns on him. His concern immediately shifts to the village elder. He asks why the old man was allowed to go to the pharmacy alone at such an hour. He suggests following him, but she, awkwardly looking away, admits that before the elder left, she did not ask where exactly this store is located. She gently insists that he stay seated and continue recovering until the elder returns, explaining that there is no point in rushing now. He looks down, a shadow of guilt on his face for giving in to exhaustion just when help was needed most. Watching her, he feels the hidden tension in her posture and understands. She is just as worried about Irina's condition as he is. A heavy premonition overwhelms him, and this weight seems even more unbearable. He is met by her firm persistence when she tells him not to dismiss his own contribution. She emphasizes, without his help, they wouldn't have even managed to reach this city, let alone find a way to help. In response, he remains reserved, saying it is too early for gratitude, as the young Irina has not even received the medicine yet, but she is sincerely touched and thanks from the heart for everything he has already done for them. Her face warms but remains sad as she recalls a painful memory from her past. She says that when her own mother fell ill with an adult disease, she was completely helpless. She could only sit and watch through tears as her mother's life dimmed and faded away. Listening intently, she explains that the news that Irina had caught the same disease brought back the same boundless despair to her. She feared that once again she would be unable to do anything to change the tragic ending. But now everything is different. Sitting with her back to him, she admits, it was only worth borrowing his strength hand they actually reached this city for medicine, finally giving her a real way to help the girl. This realization brought her deep relief and hope, something she had not felt for a long time. She returns to him with a radiant, tearful smile with her voice shows how much salvation his presence has brought her. He only freezes with his gaze. He is struck by the depth of her gratitude and the open, bare emotion in her voice. Her overly sincere thanks confuse him. Abruptly stands up, shakes off drowsiness, and lets out a determined shout, stretching his arms as he prepares to tackle the tasks ahead, while she looks at him softly and gratefully. He urgently approaches the village elder, quickly apologizes for the delay, and immediately asks how the medicines, which they urgently need, are doing. The elder, relieved to see he has woken up, greets him warmly. Carefully watching him, the elder raises a small precious flask and explains that thanks to the influence of Granny Yoru, they were able to get the medicine without any complications. Gina continues to observe, and her expression softens. The weight of their mission suddenly seems a little lighter. He continues to talk about the old woman's reputation, noting that in the medical community of this town she is a legendary figure. It turned out that just showing her certificate letter was enough for the local pharmacists to give medicine even in the middle of the night, and the young man was so stunned that he could not recover. The woman he considered a simple mystic had such professional prestige. Finally holding the medicine in their hands, the group returns to their huge iron Weybridget, stands like a beacon of light against the backdrop of the desert, wind-exhausted, snowy, nice landscape. Settles into the driver's seat. He prepares for the long journey back, and the darkness outside is complete and without any recognizable landmarks. Gina expresses her concern about how not to lose the course in such emptiness, but he remains firm, focused, and confident that they will find a way through this darkness. During the activation of the controls on the dashboard, a holographic map flashes and flickers. Its precise lines trace a path through the surrounding forests and hills as the navigation system starts up. While they prepare to set off, the elder is jolted by surprise. A small white owl speaks in a human voice. The driver immediately explains, "This creature has the unique ability to remember any place it has ever been, so it unfailingly guides them back on the road." Despite concerns that the driver hasn't rested enough, the young man insists on continuing and entrusts his companions to watch carefully whether monsters are lurking somewhere in the shadows. After the last nod of understanding, he grabs the steering wheel, ready to break through the night to deliver the medicine. He reassures his companions and brushes off exhaustion with laughter, recalling his past life as a corporate slave. The elder still cannot comprehend the strange term, and Gina watches him with curiosity and anxiety, wondering how he can be so energetic after such a long journey. His gaze fixes on the road ahead as the clock on the panel ticks past 2 a.m. Having been behind the wheel for 18 hours straight, he calculates how far they have come and knows, as long as no adventure happens on the road, they will arrive exactly on schedule. The heavy vehicle rumbles through the darkness, its headlights cutting a lonely path through the silence of the wild terrain. Slowly, the oppressive blackness of the night dissolves into soft gray and pink hues of dawn, revealing a torn, alien landscape of gigantic stone formations. When the first rays of morning flood the cabin, Gina notices dawn has finally come. Taking advantage of the better visibility, he decides to increase speed, and she silently hopes their current pace will be enough to arrive on time. But the toll of the journey is clearly visible on their little guide. There may be curses scattered on the dashboard, lying like the dead. Its energy is completely exhausted. They peer at the little owl, frightened by its sudden silence and lack of movement. Care for their friend is interrupted by sudden movement outside. He strains his gaze, eyes widen, and whispers whether a monster has appeared to block their path through the past. Ahead, two gigantic dark figures loom like torn teeth against the morning sky. He looks through the glass, and his face hardens as the reality of this obstacle before them finally sinks in. He tightens his grip on the steering wheel and squints, staring at the horizon where a thick cloud of dust begins to rise. He asks Gina what she can see from her seat, sensing that somewhere far away something has gone wrong. A dust cloud spreads over the empty landscape. Jagged rocks stand out above like teeth jutting into the sky. She leans forward, and her eyes widen as soon as she recognizes the source of the commotion. An excessive herd of monsters rushes straight at them. She breaks into a scream and warns, a crush is approaching. Under the weight of black bulls, the ground trembled, monsters with multiple eyes and torn horns, rushing forward in a frantic, relentless frenzy. Gina states that in such numbers they are a deadly threat, because getting in their way means death. In response, Sidru decides to steer the car onto higher ground so the escape can pass safely by. Suddenly, a small white owl lets out a piercing cry. Its wings twitch wildly, and it alerts the pair to the danger that is about to catch up. Quickly thanking the creature for the warning, adjusting the course, and acknowledging the owl's sharp hearing and role in keeping them safe. But when she looks at this devastating crowd, a chilling realization overwhelms her. The monsters are not attacking, they are fleeing, terrified to death by something even scarier behind them. She watches as a giant trail of dust bursts from the valley, and the very earth screams under the weight of the approaching wave. In front of the swirling cloud plumes, a herd of black bulls rushes madly in desperate panic. Their predatory instincts vanish, giving way to pure, unadulterated terror. Gazing at the chaos in response, she warns the others. Something huge is following the herd. Its scale far exceeds anything they have encountered. A cold awareness washes over her. Even if they climb higher, they cannot hide from a threat of this size. From their shaky vantage point, the mobile house on wheels looks like a mere toy against the backdrop of the impending total destruction. Inside the vehicle, he grips the steering wheel with trembling hands, and his gaze is frozen with both fear and iron determination. He reminds himself of the distance they have already covered and that lives depend on them. He swears they will get the medicine and return alive, no matter what monster is on their heels. The valley floor shudders as the lone crew races through the narrow passage, chased by a cloud of dust rising like a wall and threatening echoes of immense danger thunder. In the cabin, he grips the seat, eyes wide with fear, while the ground behind him explodes with a series of harsh tremors that are about to devour the road. From the sudden impact, he freezes in shocked stupor as a gigantic multi-eyed creature leaps at him from the wreckage. roaring so loudly it rings in his ears, and he wonders aloud if the creature supposedly defeated by Gina somehow returned from the dead. The elder quickly corrects him, explaining that this is a completely different specimen. He adds that mutavora are usually solitary and territorial creatures, so such a consecutive appearance is extremely unusual. While the vehicle is still in frantic flight, he manages to catch something in the rear window that makes him freeze. Thoughts race wildly searching for an escape, while a small owl silently watches. He freezes in shock as she moves to the back of the bus. Her hand rests on the blade, and she warns that the beast's furious acceleration will soon overwhelm them, insisting on staying behind to slow the chase. He protests immediately, and anxiety rings in his voice at the very thought of her facing such odds alone, while the elder speaks of a possible detour that will force them to fall back. Despite his pleas, she stands firm before the overwhelming wave of monstrous bulls and the gigantic giant, drawing her sword, calling for him to witness her victory, and swearing she will not be defeated. She urges him to hurry. Her voice cuts sharply with urgency as she warns that the black bulls are already approaching. Inside, he grips the steering wheel, sweat pouring down his forehead, and the device clicks reporting their coordinates to return here in the future. He looks back through the rear window. On his face is a desperate promise that he will come back for her. As the engine roars, the distance between them grows, and she remains alone, a solitary figure against the backdrop of a boundless, dangerous landscape. She offers a barely noticeable, calm smile, accepting the burden of her choice. Beneath her, the ground shakes as the heavy vehicle bursts forward, raising dust that blankets the air while she flees the inevitable slaughter. She stands steadfast, the wind whips her hair into a golden wild swirl around her determined gaze. A gigantic, clumsy mass of mutavora looms over her. This is Ma Jape, and smaller, many-horned black bulls gather around. Despite everything, she draws her blade, a single spark of defiance against the encroaching shadow. Meanwhile, the bus thuds down the uneven mountain path, the suspension growling from the strain during this high-speed escape. He stared motionless at the road ahead. His fingers on the steering wheel turned white from tension as he struggled with guilt for leaving his comrade behind. He apologizes to the elder for the bumpy ride, but his voice is tense. He knows that speed is their only chance. The old man is thrown by the violent jolts from behind, and the little white owl clings with its claws, watching their frantic flight. He tightly grips the steering wheel, and in his mind races the image of Gina standing alone against the monsters. Every second stretches into eternity, risks everything to buy them time. A heavy machine roars across the deserted expanses, breaking the silence and raising a giant cloud of dust, rushing through the landscape faster than any horse can catch up. When the sun sets beyond the horizon, the bright colors of twilight spread into the deep, dark, starless darkness of night, thus pass the hours spent in desperate flight. In the quiet village, lanterns tremble against the darkness, and sentries from the height of wooden towers watch warily and are unaware of the mechanical beast approaching. These two piercing beams of light cut through the valley shadows, announcing the traveler's return long before the engine sound reaches the village gates. The guards squint into the distance, trying to understand whether those shining balls are the eyes of some strange servant belonging to Lord Shigeto. Distrust turns into wild trembling as soon as they realize the impossible has happened. The group really returned from the distant land of Odorio overnight. He gets out of the car next to the elder woman, and she immediately calls Granny Euro. The villagers gather, reporting that the arena is being cared for at home, but the condition was so severe that they feared he would not survive until morning. Fortunately, the medicine arrived just in time. She watches intently as Grandma Euro works at a practical speed. Her hands are still while she crushes rare herbs, grinding them into a fine powder. The rhythmic scraping of the mortar and pestle is the only sound in the tense room until she carefully pours the mixture into a glass container. While the medicine was ready, she together with the elder carefully lifted the sick girl, coaxing her to swallow the bitter liquid. Irenewith, a face covered in dark, hot spots, drinks weakly, and her life force seems to melt with every shallow breath. Behind the small hut, the night silence is broken only by the muffled whispers of villagers gathered in the darkness, eagerly peering through the windows and pressing against the doors, their faces showing fear and desperate hope for the child inside. Turning back to the bed, the doctor sees. The girl's breathing remains heavy, her skin glistens with cold sweat while the illness destroys her fragile body. The most imperceptible convulsive rise and fall of her chest even out, and the tension of pain in her facial features begins to subside. Noticing changes in her condition, the elder leans forward. His weary hand reaches out to check her temperature. He watches her intently, holding his breath, waiting for a sign that the treatment has already taken effect. He is silent for a long time, not taking his eyes off hers, and carefully lifts her eyelid to check the clarity. Behind him, a young man freezes in place, his eyes wide, as if pleading for good news. Finally, the elder turns to the door and proclaims that the medicine workhead voice sounds heavy with deep relief. His words immediately explode outward in a wave of joy. The crowd begins to cheer wildly, and shouts echo through the village like thunder. The celebration becomes joyful. The young man exhales a long, trembling, breath-heavy burden of responsibility finally lifting from his shoulders. Next to him, the old woman who made the remedy can no longer contain herself, covering her face as tears of relief stream down her cheeks. He stands with a sudden, sharp decision on his face eyes, fixed on a target only he can see. Without saying a word, he jumps up and flies past the guard, his shoes throwing up dust as he rushes to his car. Even in Belk Watcham Go, the confusion only thickens when they realize Gina is also missing. She was supposed to be by the bed, but she is nowhere to be found. Noise pulls the elder outside, and there the guards quickly report strange disappearances, while others try to maintain the silence needed to restore the arena. The elder's face darkens with a heavy secret. He ignores the bustling whispers of the villagers, who take his gloomy silence for a sudden illness. He watches the vigilant trail of the bus that just left, silently entrusting the safety of the missing warrior to the man who just sped away. Far from the village, a heavy rain washes away the remains of the fallen beast, and the silence of the forest is broken only by the steady rumble of the downpour. In the raging storm, Shaidru stands by his car holding the powerless whistle Jin, soaked from the rain. He managed to bring her back to the safety of the bus. It stands parked amid the rain pouring through the forest. Inside the vehicle, her eyelids tremble, her eyes open, and the haze of unconsciousness slowly recedes, revealing dirt and bruises dripping down her face. Seeing her move, he leans over her with a gentle smile, showing from the bottom of his heart that he has finally been released. She has regained consciousness. She suddenly rises in panic, calling his name with a trembling voice. The sharp movement makes her grimace. He sharply urges her not to move, explaining that although he managed to provide basic first aid, her body is still covered with wounds from the battle. Her first thought is the young girl, but he reassures her. Everyone is safe inside the van, and he offers warm soup to chase away the cold from the storm. He confirms that the medicine reached its destination, and Arena is safe, so she breaks into tears pure with gratitude and relief. Noticing the oversized shirt she now wears, she listens as he shyly explains. He had to take off her wet cloak and dry her thoroughly. He offers her his clothes to warm her, despite his anxiety over their sin having occurred. She looks at him with a gentle, tired smile and with all her heart thanks him for coming to find her. He nods, his gaze soft as he finally suggests returning to Harkham Village, where everyone awaits their return with impatience and anxiety. Having made the decision, he takes the steering wheel, and the heavy machine begins its journey through the broken, uneven terrain. The engine hums steadily as they leave the battlefield behind and head towards the horizon. When the bus approaches the village gates, a small crowd has already gathered on the road in eager anticipation. Nearby stand the village elders and a young girl all watching the path, holding their breath. She sits among others, eyes wide open, hope and distrust mixed in them, as the familiar transport comes into view. The burden of the recent ordeal seems to hang in the air while she waits even a moment to see her savior. The bus finally breaks into a pause, a screech, and the wheels raise a small cloud of dust. He peeks out from the driver's seat. His face seems to harden under the weight of the moment as the doors begin to hiss and open. Carefully helps the wounded elf woman to descend. Her body is still thickly wrapped in heavy bandages. Seeing this, the young girl tries to get up from her place, but the elders immediately stop her, warning that it is still too early for her to stand on her own. Ignoring protests and her own physical weakness, she still steps forward stumbling, her legs trembling under the strain. Driven by pure emotions, she, in despair trying to reach the one who risked everything for her, falls to the ground. Her determination stuns the spectators, their faces frozen with surprise and anxiety. He silently watches as the bond between the two survivors overcomes their physical pain, becoming a poignant return to the safety of the village. She stretches out her hand, her small palm trembles as she tightly grasps the wooden railing to hold on. Next to her stands a warrior woman, tall and straight. Her silhouette stands out against the bright sky, but her posture reveals hidden, deep fatigue. Her boots press firmly into the ground, anchoring her in place as she prepares to endure the emotional weight of this moment. They finally collide in desperate embrace. Tears flow down their faces, and the tension of the entire ordeal subsides. Nearby, villagers watch, mixed with feelings of relief and pity, because they see the physical price their defenders have paid on this journey. Suddenly, the warrior woman's knees buckle, and she collapses to the ground, not letting go of the young girl in her arms. Saidru breaks into a scream, reaching forward as soon as he sees her strength finally leaving her. She gives a barely noticeable, exhausted smile. Her eyelids twitch convulsively, close, and she barely whispers that relief has come in a wave so much so that her body no longer has the strength to stay upright. Saidru shifts his gaze to the others. He has already heard from the village elder about their reckless behavior. He insists first the treatment of wounds, and he orders the young girl to immediately return to her bed, but she responds with playful stubbornness and a confident, stubborn gait. When the peasants begin to help the exhausted couple, he stands beside the elder and calmly, thoughtfully observes everything, for the immediate danger has passed, but the path to recovery is only beginning. He stands before the village elder, who bows his head in deep gratitude. The old man acknowledges all the incredible labor and suffering he endured for their sake, and says that words cannot express his gratitude. He continues his restrained conversation, and with a heavy heart, honestly admits, there is nothing valuable left in the village that could be given as a reward. To survive these recent hardships, they had to sell every Thinjev in the livestock. In response, the young man gives a gentle smile. A small white owl calmly settled on his shoulder. He says that for him and his companion, the joy of the peasant is the only reward they need. He shifts his gaze to the community and sees relief on the faces of those they saved. The little girl in the arena, the restored elf Jin, and all the others. For him, their safety and the return of their smiles are more precious than any material treasures. The senior lets out a quiet, grateful chuckle impressed by the young man's dedication. He says that he truly has a relaxed heart, a rare trait that brings peace to everyone around. This word catches him off guard, freezes, and involuntarily stops, weighing what it means. He recalls how in his own memories such a phrase was often used as an insult directed at his generation, but here it is presented as the highest praise. Putting aside self-reflection for a moment, he catches a new thought. Turning to the elder, he politely asks if they might have any spare old things he could use. Nearby, he patiently waits with his fluffy companion, ready to move on to the next task. He explains that during his travels his clothes got very dirty, and having no spare items, he would be grateful for a replacement. The elder nodded understandingly and assured him that finding suitable attire was an easy matter. He thanks him, and the young man says there is one more thing he wants to ask about. Mitt hesitates. He asks a strange question. Have there been rumors that someone suddenly appears as if from another world, or that people disappear without a trace? This question makes the old man stop, and his eyes widen as he comprehends the weight of the words heard. Feeling the weight of silence, the traveler quickly tries to change the subject and brush it off, as if it is nothing worth attention, but the elder still does not take his eyes off it. The elder leans closer, his face becomes stern, and he directly asks if the man standing before him is truly a visitor from another kingdom. Stunned by the precision of the question, he can only silently freeze and look back. The truth hangs like a heavy burden in the air between them. The morning sun illuminates a sturdy wooden structure hidden at the forest edge. Outside silence, but inside a conversation about to explode, heavy with weight. In the middle, surrounded by the shells of ancient texts, the village elder sits straight at the table, calmly and kindly meeting the gaze of his arriving guests. He notes that the new clothes fit perfectly, so the young man immediately thanks from the bottom of his heart for delivering these items to his temporary residence. In new clothes, the traveler straightens up to full height and does not waste time. He says he wants to continue where they stopped yesterday. The elder holds his gaze, his face suddenly hardens, and he asks an unexpected question whether his guest really came from another world. When the young man confirms, the old man finds nothing but amazed admiration. The legend turned out to be true. Noticing the fatigue etched on the guest's face, the elders suggest postponing further conversations until the next day and strongly advise him to finally get some sleep after 2 sleepless nights. A heavy silence hangs in the room, and 2 men stand in the quiet office. The weight of their shared revelation stretches in the air between them. It is interesting how his secret was revealed. The traveler demands an explanation, and the elder recounts an ancient legend. It is worth shifting the flow of the veins of the earth, and aliens from distant worlds often lose their way and wander in this realm. He listens attentively as the elder begins to tell about the earthly vein stream, the primary source of magical energy that circulates throughout the world. This stream, the elder explains, is the life force both for those who wield magic and for the monsters that roam the earth. To influence even the very air they breathe is like a river. It can become calm or suddenly break loose and become turbulent. In very rare cases, this flow so wildly veers off course that it causes anomalies, distorting the very fabric of space into swirling vortices. The youth's eyes widen sharply when the elder says that these distortions can flip a bridge between different worlds, thus another world or cross arises. Pausing for a moment, the old man exhales heavily, the burden of the situation etched wrinkles around his mouth. He points out that the recent chaos, the sudden appearance of creatures like Deke and the giant mutavora on public roads, is a direct consequence of the earth vein flow being severely out of balance. Looking at the silhouettes of the village guards, the elder admits, once he thought that tales about other worlds were just stories, but now, having seen Shaidru's black hair and his eccentric clothing, everyone is convinced otherwise. Shaidru nods, confirming that he really came from another world. He ended up here suddenly, just after falling asleep in his transport. He explains that in his world there were neither monsters nor magic, not even people like Gina. Moreover, he clarifies, even the little white owl there is not considered a real monster. Despite all these colossal differences, he is surprised that they can still understand each other's language. Continuing his explanation, he admits, having just arrived in this land, somehow abilities appeared in him that are impossible to acquire. The elder listens carefully, agrees. Such powers, which go against common sense even against the very sensations, are truly incredible. He reflects that with each day it will become increasingly difficult to maintain the appearance that he is just a monster. His gaze falls downward, and between them crawls a heavy silence, while he prepares to ask the question that has long gnawed at him from within. Looking the old man straight in the eyes, he confesses with desperate sincerity his deep need to return to his world. He asks if there is any known way or someone who knows how to find the way back. In response, the elder closes his eyes, and a softness mixed with regret appears on his face. He says that the legends he spoke of are ancient, and their origins are shrouded in mystery. With a heavy heart, he apologizes, admitting that he knows no way to return him back, and even when despair is ready to overwhelm, the hand clenches like a trace of the struggle inside against a situation that seems hopeless. Outside, the village maintains the appearance of pastoral calm. The residents go about their daily affairs and do not notice the weight of the conversation taking place inside. Shaking off the gloomy mood, the elder throws out a potential lead, saying that all over the world there are researchers who have dedicated their lives to studying the connection between distortions of the Earth's veins and other worlds. He freezes in shock, a spark of hope flares in his eyes. He listens attentively as the elder continues the instructions. The old man says that Shaidru might finally come across the researchers he is looking for, or find the necessary information if he visits large cities or sacred pilgrimage sites where crowds gather. This advice plunges him into deep reflection, forcing him to weigh the reality of a global journey. Even with the incredible capabilities of the camper to travel the world filled with monsters, it will be exhausting and dangerous. Yet even then, the chance to find the way home remains a very distant hope. While he is lost in thought, Gina approaches to check on him. He immediately asks about her injuries, but she waves off his concern with a smile, saying she only feels slight pain but can walk quite normally, and only then asks what knocked him off balance so much. They settle near a wooden fence under the open sky. Nearby sits a small white owlet listening as they talk. He admits that his thoughts have again turned to his homeland, Japan, and says there are still many things he wants to accomplish if he ever finds the way back. He talks about the original purpose of his efforts, that he worked tirelessly to get the camper, precisely to travel the roads and enjoy a quiet, measured life with friends. He lowers his gaze. His voice carries a note of nostalgia and uncertainty about where the path ahead leads. In response, her face lights up with a radiant, sincere smile. She catches herself thinking that such a journey is truly wonderful, and her enthusiasm cuts through his gloomy mood. Looking at the rolling hills, she stops, thinks about her own experience. At first, the strange transport scared her, but now she has learned to appreciate its conveniences. She agrees traveling together, sheltered from bad weather and having a safe place to rest, sounds like a wonderful adventure. She leans toward Heimergy, and determination flare up in her eyes again. Cheerfully exclaiming, she insists, they will do everything necessary for him to return home, fully dedicating themselves to his cause. She sharply and sincerely wants to go with him, her voice quiet but stubborn. He nervously snorts, admits that he wants it too, but the road back to his world still remains a terribly mysterious enigma. Her eyes flash with genuine excitement as she declares that she wants to see his homeland with her own eyes. Even the thought of such an unreal journey does not diminish her joy in the slightest. He freezes for a moment from her fervor, and his gaze softens as he contemplates her words. A warm hand reaches out to Hima, quiet gesture of support against the backdrop of his uncertainty. A new realization begins to take root in his mind. If there is a way back to his world, then perhaps there is also a road back here. from the thought of a bridge between these two lives, a quiet, still very timid hope sprouts within him. Watching her play with the small, fluffy owlet, he allows himself to imagine a future where he can invite them both into his world. He knows, such thoughts are too optimistic too many, but hang over his head, yet he still cannot help but wonder. Only the very possibility of hosting his new friends at home brings a faint smile to his lips. He thinks, it would be wonderful to build a bridge between his past and this strange new present. He turns back to her, giving sincere words of thanks, and his determination grows stronger again thanks to her unwavering support. He promises to do everything in his power to find a way home, starting with another consultation with the village elder. Soon he finds himself at the elder's threshold and enters a quiet room filled with books. The old man lifts his eyes from reading and greets the guest with a calm, welcoming presence. Shidru listens attentively while he insists on his unwavering decision to embark on a journey to find a way back to his world. The young man admits his vulnerability. He says that he still hasn't gotten used to this strange land, and in just a few short days has already encountered a bunch of deadly threats. To his concern, the elder responds with an understanding nod, assures that Shidru is a welcome guest, and proposes a plan. Shidru is to travel for a month to weigh all his options, then return to the safety of the village. Looks into the distance at the horizon, reflects, travel is necessary, but wandering unknown lands alone is too dangerous for someone like Shidru. To save himself from this danger, he calls Gina and orders her to become Shidru's guard on the road. The sudden order both the elf and the young man freeze in shock, everything decided so quickly. She immediately takes on the task with boundless energy, even suggesting to set off right at that moment. But the old woman worries whether she has had enough time to recover from her previous wounds. Leaving any pain in the past, the warrior rushed away to prepare for departure the next morning, while Shigeru was left to wonder whether he should worry about her overly passionate impatience and considerable strength. When she disappears from sight, the elder watches her with a heavy gaze. He has already told everything he knows about her past, but the girl tragically still does not suspect her true nature. He silently stared into the distance, his heart tightening, and understood. To keep a young woman named Gina within the narrow confines of this small village meant to wrong her, to lose her opportunities. The old man understood. Even if she knew she was an elf, and therefore different from everyone around, mere existence was not enough. She needed to live through all the incredible contrasts lifespan, values, and the absolute physical and magical superiority her kin possessed over others. He watched as her bright, hopeful smile stretched toward Shidru. He felt that somewhere deep down, in her subconscious, she wanted to look behind the forest. Addressing the young man, the older woman noted how well Shidru seemed to understand Hirvan from their first meeting and formally asked him to allow her to accompany him for her own development. He accepted responsibility, holding a steady gaze, and simply said that he understands the weight of the request. Soon the day of departure came and the whole community gathered near the strange metal wagon to say goodbye under the clear, open sky. Peasants pressed baskets with food and all necessities into his hands. Their faces shone with warmth and sincere wishes for the road ahead. While they prepared to set off for the great city of Ludi, a bustling center, as the elder advised, he stared at the map, absorbing both determination and doubt in his gaze, wondering if they would really find the way. He stands among the village men, his face burning as they jokingly interrogate him about his romantic life, whether he has a wife or a lover waiting somewhere else. Thanks to his recent heroic deeds, sharing Deke meat, saving young Arena, and coming to Gina's aid twice, his authority among the men reached new heights, and they do not hesitate to sing his praises. The realization hits him like a physical slap as he understands. They are hinting that he should marry someone from the village, but the men erupt in anger over what they see as his complete blindness to Gina's feelings. As the conversation continues, she approaches the group curious about their quiet whispering, so the men quickly change the subject, noting that a month-long journey usually causes terrible anxiety. In a moment, two are already loading their supplies into the transport's bed. Their excitement is immediately felt, while a white owlet flutters nearby, impatiently waiting for the journey to finally begin. He turns to his companion and asks if she is finally ready to go, and she responds with a bright, determined nod. Despite her enthusiasm, a shadow of hesitation crosses her face, and she admits, the thought of being away from home for a whole month is already starting to make her feel lonely. In response, he takes out a strange device with a long handle, connected to a glowing screen, explains that it is for a commemorative photo, and suggests gathering everyone by the village gate once more for the last time. He captures the moment on the digital screen. The village is gathered together in one perfect frame. He shows the device to his companions. He sees their eyes widen in disbelief. Gina is convinced he is some kind of wizard, and the men wonder, how can a portrait be created in an instant so they can see their faces whenever they want? When the farewells ended, the heavy engine of the car rumbled, coming to life and vibrated, hitting the dryer. When the van sets off, Gina leans out the window, energetically waves her hand, and shouts goodbye to the whole crowd of villagers who watch them leave. He looks into the distance, and a quiet smile barely plays on his lips, while the strange, beautiful landscape of this world with heights soaring in the air and the dazzling sun relentlessly rolls by. The journey officially began. The white Vanisloner calmly and stubbornly rolls forward across the endless, wild, rocky terrain. Sitting in the driver's seat, he decided it was time to enter their final destination into the navigator, recalling the place the villagers described. But as soon as the map calculates the route, his face pales, he convulsively clutches his head and freezes in disbelief. Gina remains watching him in confusion, trying to understand what could have so instantly thrown him off track. The camper van stands quietly in the wild terrain until the digital display flickers and shows that 2 holding points have been accumulated. The interface displays various repair and supply functions, confirming the current working condition of the vehicle. Inside the cabin, he examines the instrument panel, notices that the odometer shows 708 kilometers. He studies a separate screen. The machine is still at level 1, and over 600 kilometers remain to the next milestone, and he wonders what exact conditions are needed to earn more points. The confusion only grows as he compares the readings. Although the trip meter shows 700 kilometers traveled, they have advanced only halfway to the next level. He puzzles over the discrepancy and cannot understand why the system does not reflect their full journey. Noticing his concentration, the elf warrior approaches closer and asks if this is the same kind of magic he previously used to help the little owl grow a specific spell. He confirms her guess, acknowledging that the process has a mystical nature. He exhales, admitting that he is still unsure how to properly control these abilities and that forcing growth feels like fighting every moment. She says something reassuring, hinting that there is no need to rush the process. She smiles warmly, reminding him that the fluffy creature is their precious companion who requires patient care. Her words strike his heart, and he suddenly realizes he has not truly seen the owl as a partner yet. Then he turns on the auto repair to patch up wear after their recent travels and wonders if the vehicle's condition will improve by morning. A heavy basket full of fresh bread and vegetables is set down on the floor. With a dull thud end, he says that finally, it's time to eat. She immediately agrees. Her appetite is already kindled by the very sight of the provisions. He stands outside near the van, reflecting on the generosity of those they left behind, how the village elder gave plenty of food and even returned silver coins as change for the medicine they brought. She nods in agreement. Both are moved by the unexpected kindness of the villagers. He stands outside the camper van laying out their supplies for dinner. When Gina offers to help start the fire, he reassures her. The internal systems of this vehicle can withstand the heat. He divides the duties, asks Gina to prepare the vegetables for the soup, while he takes on the main components. In a row on a wooden board lie 2 loaves of dark rye bread coarse, dense crusts, and a homely, simple appearance. Looking at the bread, he noted its dense, heavy texture and slight sourness, which made it hard to get full just by eating it. He remembered how in the village they softened it in rich meat broths or piled it high with fillings and toppings. Inspired, he decided to experiment a bit with the cuisine to save their dinner. He begins by carefully cutting the bread into even cubes, then melts butter in a hot pan and throws in the cubes, seasoning them with a pinch of powder he calls magic, a universal seasoning from his world that adds juicy depth to the dish. While he works, she approaches with a bowl of freshly chopped vegetables and asks if the portion is enough. He shows her an approving thumbs up, confirms that everything is perfect, and orders to add them to the cauldron where everything is simmering. Vegetables are left to simmer in fragrant broth until tender. Once the soup is ready, it is poured into bowls, and golden bread cubes fried in butter are carefully placed on top as the final touch. The result is a hot, hearty bowl of vegetable soup from Harkim village. The croutons soak up the rich broth. They settle at a small table just outside the van to pay tribute to the fruits of their labor and enjoy the food. As soon as she takes the first bite, the warmth and flavor of the dish seem to provide an instant respite on their journey. She froze with wide-open eyesore pupils, dilated, as the complex flavors of the dish danced on her taste receptors for the first time. This delight arises from the incredible combination of Har Kim village bread and the soup, which she finds so rich, like a festive banquet. Shaidru agrees too. He says the vegetables from Marina's village are incredibly sweet and fragrant, making the dish truly special. She cannot help but feel a slight confusion from the incredible quality of the dish, and admits that her own culinary skills pale in comparison, is even afraid to try it. Shaidru himself seems somewhat impressed with his successful work. Does he really cook such delicious food every time they eat? He explains that his motivation is born from her presence. If he were alone, he would be content with simple, instant noodles, but when there is someone to share food with, he is inspired to be more creative. It is the mention of cup noodles that ignites a new curiosity in Hirsch has never heard of such a strange idea. She cannot help but giggle at his modesty. Nearby, a small white owl is completely absorbed in its portion, its fluffy body almost spilling over the bowl as it eats with pleasure. While they sit together outside near the camper, Shaidru explains that the spices he used are real kitchen tools designed to make mealtime more enjoyable. She listens attentively, impressed by how much thought and care he puts into their daily meals. A warm, sincere smile spreads across her face, and her eyes close with pure pleasure. Resh understands how lucky she is to share these moments. Seeing her so happy brings him deep relief. Everything he spent during the day finally feels worthwhile. Laughter echoes in the silence of the wild wilderness as the day begins to fade, and Shaidru decides they will set up camp right here. Even when the conversation quiets down, the little owl sticks to its own, intently finishing the soup to the last drop under the darkening sky. She watched as Gina announced that she was going down to the river to wash. Shaidru quickly interrupted, warning, the sun is already setting, the night air will be too cold, and also the danger of monsters hiding in the darkness. After that, he introduced her to something completely unfamiliar, a shower that stands right inside the camper's safety. He led her inside to explain the strange devices. He handed her a bottle and said it was specialized body soap that produces thick, cleansing foam. Gina looked at the things with eyes wide open in curiosity, trying to reconcile these modern luxuries with her experience in the wild. Continuing the tour, he showed the shampoo, explaining its specific purpose for hair, and handed her a clean towel. Politely nodding, he asked, if anything goes wrong, call him, then stepped outside to give her the needed privacy. In the small shop, mechanical levers were turned and water sprayed evenly from the perforated metal head. Outside, he knelt on one knee and leaned against the vehicle, while a small white owl clustered nearby. He remembered how casually he himself had suggested taking a shower, and wondered if Gina had been too defenseless. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, the elf girl stood entranced, trembling from a sensation she could only describe as a rain of hot water. She stood under the flow of water, allowing the warmth to soak into her skin and wash away the dirt of the road. Steam wrapped around her as she closed her eyes, fully immersing herself in a rare moment of absolute calm. Outside again, he quietly smiled to himself and realized, Gina is probably capable of handling any threat that might arise. Switching his attention to his fluffy companion, he jokingly asked if that creature would like to take a turn in the shower, receiving a soft, curious chirp in response. The little white owl flinches as the bathroom door is torn open. Gina bursts out wet, panicked, and shouting to Shaidru that both hot and cold water suddenly disappeared, fearing something terrible has broken in the camp's internal systems. Her sudden appearance hits him so hard it feels like he's glued to the spot. His eyes widen as he sees the elf, soaking wet. Gina, caught up in her own panic, only now begins to realize the inappropriateness of her state. Her face flushes, and the silence between them stretches on and on. He sharply looks away. A deep crimson creeps up his neck as he stares at the wall, sweat beads forming on his forehead. Behind him, the realization of her vulnerability finally sinks in. The initial shock of losing water turns into a growing, suppressed shame. A chaotic symphony of screams bursts out as he convulsively covers his eyes and desperately insists he saw nothing, while she frantically searches for shelter. Even the little white owl seems caught up in the whirl of their mutual awkwardness. Its wings tremble, and the tension in the cramped space reaches a fever pitch. When the first panic subsides, he steps outside and, sighing heavily, explains, the water tank simply ran dry. He assures her the camper is not broken and the supply will be replenished by morning, but his words barely ease the discomfort still hanging in the air. While the moon hangs over the quiet landscape, she remains hidden inside, immersed in reproaches for her supposed lack of refinement, and apologizing to her mother for the scandalous turn of events. Outside, he gently urges her to pull herself together, properly dry off, and put on at least some clothes before they talk about anything further. The night air settles on the jagged, uneven terrain, and the distant mountain silhouette cuts against the sky, with soft clouds slowly drifting by. The world indifferently watches the small drama unfolding inside the metal walls of the strange trailer. She lifts her gaze upward to the camper's roof and notes with satisfaction, the repairs are complete and the new features work as intended. He exhales quietly and calls her again, wondering if she has finally managed to pull herself together. He sat behind the wheel, a heavy guilt frozen on his face, as he offered a sincere apology for the lack of water. He admitted he had surprisingly simply forgotten about the tank's limited capacity while she remained silent, staring out the window, standing with her back to him. As he continued to focus on his own thoughts, it dawned on him he had been careless. He had poured too much water on ordinary things, cooking and washing dishes. He hadn't even considered that she would need a considerable amount for her long hair. Foolishly, he assumed the resource was limitless just because it replenishes itself every night. The burden of shame seemed to crush her spirit. She slumped forward and muttered that she might as well give up the idea of marriage altogether. Seeing her so depressed, he urged her to stop these talks, warning that her current state of mind was becoming dangerous. Then he tried to lift her spirits. He said she had a wonderful character and was already quite beautiful. He also assured her that when she became even more attractive, men would undoubtedly line up to ask for her hand. She paused for a moment, partially hiding her face while she pondered his words, and quietly asked if he really believed what he was saying. He did not hesitate and again confirmed his confidence. Other men definitely would not have left someone like her abandoned. His words seemed to hit right in the heart, and she was momentarily confused in her thoughts. Raising her hand to touch her hair, she quietly reminded him of their previous conversation where she said she had no family left. Standing alone in the silence of the living rooms, she explained. After her mother's death, she lived alone. There was no one else left to consider. She realized that her recent behavior was probably just a consequence of not being used to sharing her space with another person. She listened as Shaidru gently inquired whether she truly felt better in her long-standing solitude, and genuine concern was audible in his voice. In response, she admitted that the time with him and the little white owl was truly pleasant. Because of this, he suggested that this journey might gradually help her get used to the presence of others again. A soft, sincere smile touched her lips as she quietly agreed. The weight of her past loneliness seemed to noticeably, just a little, ease in this warm moment. When the conversation died down, the heavy transport rumbled along the winding mountain road, and finally, having turned the corner, revealed a new destination point on the horizon. In the valley below spread the walled city of February stone fortifications, towering and menacingly looming over the boundless open spaces. Seeing the huge walls, she swallowed in amazement at the scale, and Shaidru, noticing the excitement among the travelers nearby, decided to hide the unusual cart and proceed on foot to avoid attracting unwanted attention. They soon reached the bustling entrance to the city. Near the arched stone gateway stood guards, watching the steady flow of merchants and travelers who passed endlessly through the gate. But their attempt to blend into the crowd immediately failed. Passersby whispered in surprise as soon as they saw the rare forest owl. Feeling the growing attention, Shaidru sharply whispered to the creature to hide under her hood, and she accepted the request without hesitation. She walks beside Shaidru through the bright, crowded streets of February, and finally the city reveals itself in full stature. The architecture is magnificent. Stone buildings and towers rise above the noisy market, so around there is a feeling of prosperity and order. As they make their way through the crowd, Shaidru says that there is an incredible diversity of people here. Remembering how in Odorio he never had the chance to see so many different peoples, he pauses on this. Gina agrees. Her gaze scans the crowd, and she adds that even for her there is much new and almost too much here, from burly dwarves to noisy traders, all together only intensify the city's wild, energetic world. The calm observation is broken by a sudden commotion nearby. The merchant is noticeably aggressively pushing a customer's goods aside with his feet. Shaidru watches silently, and his face hardens when he realizes the coin offered was insufficient, so the seller rudely and publicly refuses, forcing the customer to fuss. He turns to another noise, where a shopkeeper pounds his chest. He is driving someone away and insists that there is no food for people like them. The hostility in the air is palpable, a sharp contrast to the grandeur of the city they had just admired. The object of the trader's anger is a beastman resembling a lion. He is pushed onto the cobblestones, a heavy, dull thud. Gina, confusedly relying on Shaidru's tangled explanations, says that these people come from different beastman tribes, wolves, birds, sea folk, and although their roots differ, they are often kept together and here, in a place like this, are met with outright contempt. They continue on their way, but the mood changes. Shaidru asks why beastmen are treated with such disdain. Gina admits she has not heard of such open discrimination as a common practice, so this is probably a trait of this local culture, an unpleasant one they have just discovered. He reflects on the complexity of this great city and understands, despite developed networks of information and transport, entrenched prejudices still live on, like a completely different world than what he heard in stories, and this leaves him bewildered by the harsh reality hidden behind the impressive walls of February. Their sad contemplation is interrupted by the appearance of a well-dressed man in glasses. He approaches from behind, politely asks if they are newcomers to this city, and if they are looking for something specific. His professional manner and calm voice sharply stand out against the chaotic and hostile energy of the street. He greets them warmly and hints that if they are looking for places, February Falls is a must-see. He offers his services to arrange a guide for the journey. Hearing this, Gina bursts with excitement. She had long dreamed of seeing the legendary waterfalls. Shaidru watches her, noticing the man's words. He works at the local tourist information. Noticing their interest, the man gestures for them to follow him and suggests moving to the information desk to discuss the trip details in a more comfortable setting. Soon they arrive at a well-kept house. Inside it is clean and orderly. This place is a center where travelers in the bustling city find their direction. After settling in, the agent reveals the truth about the outing. The waterfalls are a 5-hour trek from the city gates. He emphasizes that the trail is deadly treacherous winding through monster-infested territory, so no way without a professional guard escort. The mention of the 5-hour journey momentarily throws Shaidru off balance, but the agent quickly reassures him, promising to find a skilled guide who will ensure their safety, then asks them to wait a moment. While they wait, a burly warrior with a heavy sword on his belt walks past the office. His figure silently testifies to the dangers lurking beyond the city walls. However, the agent returns with a tense face and makes it clear their selection of guides has been depleted since last week when one did not return. Shaidru comprehends the harshness of this world's culture, and Gina confidently states that she can provide their protection herself. He listens silently as the agent apologizes and explains, every certified guide is already dispatched. The man tentatively offers a replacement, an apprentice, insisting that despite the lack of experience, he can safely lead the way to the counterfeit. Skepticism clouds his face as he repeats the word apprentice again and again, doubting the wisdom of such an arrangement for a dangerous journey. Sensing hesitation, the agent quickly bows, puts his palms together, and promises a significant discount to sweeten the deal. Without waiting for the final order, the man turns and roars a command for someone named Colette to appear immediately. Beyond the counter, a small, frightened figure begins to emerge from the shadows of the back room. Her steps are light and too slow. The apprentice steps forward and is revealed, a young beast girl with fox ears and a fluffy tail. The air suddenly chills in the room as the travelers notice. She is held on a leash tightly tied around her neck. Her gaze is lowered, and her eyes are full of sorrow. Stunned by the heavy silence, he and Gina freeze and stare at the child. Their faces shift sharply from surprise to pure, unadulterated horror. The cruel reality of what is happening and the blatant, overt cruelty before them leaves them utterly speechless.